play better in the same situation this time, but Miami's also going to be better. Is it just too early to decide what to think about the Lakers?
I think it's too early. We have to see how healthy they are at the end of the year. And how many minutes Nash can play in the playoffs and how they mesh and all that. But I don't think it's too early to say that, at worst, they're the third best team in the league. That they may not finish with the third best record even in the Western Conference in the regular season. Hollinger projected them fourth, which I think is totally sane and could very well happen. But you put those four guys on the court for heavy minutes, it's going to be really hard to beat them. I thought Howard was the second best player in the league 2 years ago and probably should have won the MVP. And people sort of have already forgotten how good he was and is. And it's not like that was a lateral move with Bynum. That's a powerhouse move.
Yeah, I when that trade happened, assuming it's the same Howard, I remember writing something like you could basically not create a player in a lab who would be a better fit for that Lakers team and the problems that they have, and his ability to cover up defensively for people and run the floor and doesn't need shots.
Oklahoma City was calling plays all throughout their playoff series that were just basically designed around the fact that, okay, we know Andrew Bynum is not coming above the foul line. Yeah. So we're just going to have his guy screen for KD and get him a 17-footer, and that's going to be it over and over again.
Last team, Los Angeles Lakers.
We're going to end the whole thing.
58.5 wins for the Los Angeles Lakers. We saw them in person last night.
Yeah.
And people seem to think this team just pencil them into the finals. Right?
Well,
just put them right in.
I think you asked me a few weeks ago who I had in the finals. I without missing a beat, said Lakers Heat. And I'm not prepared to go against that.
Okay.
I'm going to stick by it.
All right.
But
an Oklahoma City team that is just thinks they can beat them anytime they play. And handled their business and would have swept if not for some of the craziest officiating in Game 3, the game that I went to, and the league should be embarrassed for the officiating in that game. It would have been a sweep.
I think it's going to be outstanding to watch. I think it's going to be
I love it too. We were saying last night, the sneaky great thing about this whole Lakers, like Gasol and Nash playing together. And everyone's paying so much attention to Howard and Kobe because Kobe's gone off the deep end and is just saying crazy things. He's feuding with Swish Parker.
Yes.
He's turning these press conferences into these like Charlie Sheen type moments now. And meanwhile, like watching Nash and Gasol, and like there was a couple high-low plays where Nash to Gasol and then the quick pass to Howard for the dunk, and you're watching and you're going, oh my God! If they ever harness this, good Lord!
And if there's a human being on the planet capable of harnessing it, Steve Nash.
Nash and Gasol together are going to be incredible to watch. And just as a basketball fan, I hate the Lakers so much. I can't even. The blood pours out of my eyes. But I love watching Gasol and I love watching Nash, and I think it's going to be awesome to watch those guys. And I can't wait to watch Kobe totally submarine it.
So there it is. I knew it was coming.
He's going to do it, too.
I knew it was coming.
He's going to submarine it. He's going to do it.
You had it jammed down there.
Year 17. Oh, he's going to do it. Let me shoot, guys.
Well, here's the thing.
He's going to do it.
You may be surprised to hear this, even though I have the Lakers penciled into the final. I like them under.
I have them under as well. But I have them at 57-50.
Yeah, well, that's right.
Like a half under. I think they're too
like
old.
A half under.
Here's the other thing with that. Oh,
yeah.
God.
I bet we're going to make the same point, so you go ahead.
I just don't think they're deep enough.
Yeah,
it's like the way they're constructed, it's like if anybody misses 20 games, they're screwed.
Their second unit remains
God.
Just unsightly, ungodly.
We were laughing.
And whatever uns you can come up with.
We were laughing when we saw Chris Duhon in the pregame warmups, and then he played.
And it got funnier.
Yeah.
Antoine Jameson played 18 minutes last night. Was no points and 2 rebounds.
He looked 50 years old.
Yeah, I mean, I thought on paper Jody Meeks.
Jody Meeks was a good signing by them.
Yeah. So
they're like 2 guys short, and now you know what the thing is, they'll be able to get those guys, but for the purposes of the over/under, that doesn't help us.
I know we're in agreement on the under.
Another thing
on this, but gently under.
you know, as anyone who plays basketball knows, it's tough to mesh with somebody right away. And what we watched last night,
Right.
they were like, it was like Howard was this new car they'd pulled out of their garage. They have no idea how to play with him yet.
I don't think that the fact that they're 0-6 in the preseason, I don't attribute anything to the preseason.
Right.
At all. I don't ascribe any significance or
Doesn't
meaning
matter.
to it. But what you're seeing is them trying out a bunch of stuff until, they're all really finding each other. And the one thing you and I agreed about last night, the thing they can't do is what they messed with a little bit, which is posting up Dwight.
Posting up Dwight,
That's not going to work.
trying super hard to get him
That
involved.
won't work.
For me, the bread and butter of this team is Nash and Gasol. And the offense has to run through them. Howard's got to be rebounding, blocking guy, block shots guy.
Yes.
Rebounding defense, run the floor. Kobe's got to be spot up shooter / if the offense breaks down, then he can freelance do his thing / open court scorer guy. But Nash and Gasol is the heart of the team. And here's my fear with them, just from the over-under standpoint. We were laughing when we were looking at their coaching staff.
Yeah.
It's like a who's who of who hasn't done anything.
It's true.
It's like, hey, how many jobs has Bernie Bickerstaff had? 40?
I know.
Chuck Person?
Eddie Jordan's in there.
Eddie Jordan?
Yeah.
Mike Brown?
Yeah, a lot of
I
guys.
mean, Nash can coach the offense, but
And Dwight Howard's going to coach the defense.
I guess.
I mean, here's the thing.
We should mention one other Dwight Howard thing.
Go ahead.
This is a very important point. Dwight Howard came out of the game in the first quarter, and he went to sit in his chair.
He did.
And some lackey came in with this foam cushion
Right.
that was like
It looked like
like
an
what was it?
inflated. It looked like an inflatable, like a half a ball thing.
I thought he was putting like the biggest whoopee cushion anyone's ever made for Howard to sit down and make a huge fart noise. It was this big. It was a foot
huge.
big.
It's had him sitting up like 2 feet higher than everybody else. It
Yeah, he
looked like
was
a
sitting
throne.
2 feet higher.
He was the king, the new king.
It was
new
like
king of L.A.
It was like something your grandfather would have in the nursing home.
That's something I wish I had right
It was
now after
something-
sitting here all 2 hours today. The thing I still have my doubts and questions about, the meta thing. I mean, can
There was a lot of meta last night.
he has to play. I mean,
Has to play.
Who else?
Looks like he's
plays
in
that
shape.
role for him.
Yeah.
He does, and he looks locked down. But I mean,
I actually
could you
think
really
they're
get
going to miss
82
Matt
from
Barnes
him?
a little bit.
I agree.
He had a good year last
He wasn't
year.
expendable. I mean, they didn't replace him with Jody Meeks as how they replaced him. I don't know. I mean,
The thing though is like, you remember like people were debating about buying him Howard, like what?
yes.
It's like, once you saw it in person, it's a no-brainer.
Oh my
It's
gosh.
just a no-brainer.
Yeah.
And Howard seems super happy.
Yeah.
Um,
He's motivated.
I think it's going to be very interesting to see how Kobe handles this. Like even like yesterday, we were watching the game, and somebody got technical in Sacramento. No surprise, since it's a team of lunatics. So Watfo, somebody got technical, and Nash shot the free throw, and I was like,
Yeah, you
oh,
thought
that's
that was
interesting.
significant.
Yeah,
Why?
so did the Laker fan next to me, because that's Kobe's free throw. It's the chicken leg.
I know, but what,
It's like Dad gets the big chicken leg at dinner.
because he's
Extra point a
he's
game.
shooting for Kareem's record
It's
still.
just an extra point a game. It's his team. You shoot the free throw. And Nash shot the free throw.
Well-
and I was like, oh, this is interesting.
Here's what we need to look out for then. Who shoots that free throw once the regular season starts? Maybe it was just Nash because Nash scored 6 points.
Nash
last
is
night.
one of the 4 greatest free throw shooters in the history of
There's
basketball.
that as well.
So I think he should probably shoot it. I just thought it was interesting. Like,
Yeah.
and then you watch there. You know,
Well,
there
doesn't
was.
that mean that Kobe's sharing?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm just saying. I thought that was interesting. I thought we watched. There was one stretch where Kobe didn't really touch the ball for like
Yeah.
3 minutes,
Right.
and then when he got it, and we were just laughing,
Oh.
like, oh, it's going up, it's
Yeah,
going up.
and it
Here it
did.
goes.
Yeah.
And he took a shot with 3 guys on him. I think that's going to be interesting. And then we watched the end of the game, and they were down 1.
Yeah.
Nash dribbled underneath, couldn't find anybody, dribbled around. Kobe's standing there with his hands up. Nash dribbles back, circles back, and does a little floater and misses it.
I mean, it's a floater that he hits 70% of the time, I bet.
The last 4 years, last 7 years, whatever, any situation like that, everybody in that team deferred to Kobe and passed it to him.
Well,
And now it's like, all right, Nash is going to take a couple of those. So
Yeah.
I'm not saying he can't handle it. I'm just saying it's going to be an interesting subplot.
it's a good subplot. It's going to be very,
And he's got
it's gonna
the
be
third.
fascinating.
He's got the scoring record in the back of his head, but he also has the titles and the 6 rings in the back of his
The
head.
titles mean more than the scoring record.
No question.
So
No question.
So I think that's where you're looking for the Kobe submarine. I'm looking for the Kobe sublimate. I think he's going to be able to mesh.
I think he's running the gamut of emotions.
Oh, the gamut of emotions.
I think Dwight Howard's getting a lot of attention. I think Nash and Gasol, the big winner is Pau Gasol.
The biggest winner.
The big 2012-2013 winner is Pau Gasol. Period. Out of anybody on any team. Could have been on Houston. Could have been thrown into that Orlando trade.
Sure.
Could have been rerouted to Philly or somewhere.
Or Denver.
Could have been whatever.
Denver would have been okay.
He gets to play with Steve Nash.
Yeah.
He gets to be on the high post, which is where he loves to be.
It makes
and then
the most sense for
sometimes go down the low post. Sorry.
Yeah.
He gets to kind of switch spots with Dwight. On high post, he can throw that little pass thing.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to worry about rebounding that much.
Yeah. No, I know.
It's just fantastic.
Big winner. It really is.
And he was also 5 inches taller than Dwight Howard.
He is much taller than Dwight Howard.
He's much taller than Dwight Howard.
Dwight Howard is 6'8".
No, he's 6'9".
Okay, 6'9".
He might be 6'9.5".
He is not.
He's 4 inches smaller than Dwight Howard.
He's much shorter.
Than Pau Gasol.
He is much
6'9".
shorter than Pau Gasol.
So we both go under on that. So to recap, we have. Do you want to make Dallas a lock? I'm a little afraid of Dirk.
We need one more lock because we only have 4 locks.
Well, we only had 2 from the other one. Oh, you for 7 locks
at
total?
The whole thing. No, we only have 4 locks on this whole. Oh no, we have 5. We're good with locks. We needed an odd
Houston
number
under
of locks.
29.5. We agree on that.
Yeah.
New Orleans over 27. We agree on that.
Mm-hmm.
Utah over 43. We agree on that.
Yeah.
Let's stay away from Dallas.
I had.
Let's stay away from Rick Carlisle. We don't have to agree on that. And then Toronto and Atlanta. Toronto, Atlanta. So we got 5.
Toronto, Atlanta, Utah, New Orleans,
and Houston. We'll stay away from Dallas.
Yeah, stay away from.
So
Dallas.
those are our 5.
Yeah.
And then the ones we disagreed on: Golden State. You liked over 36. I liked under.
Yeah.
Memphis 49. I liked under. You liked over.
Yeah.
Oklahoma City 60.5. You liked under. I liked over.
By a half.
Still, you liked it.
Yeah, I know. You're right.
Portland. I like the over, 34.5. You like the under.
Yeah.
I got you back, Portland. And then Sacramento. This is the part of the podcast where the coffee stopped kicking in.
31 and 51. Is that too much to ask?
That team is a chemistry train wreck.
It's a science experiment gone bad.
I have the under for them. And so the ones we disagree on are the Boston, Orlando, Philly, Golden State, Memphis, Oklahoma City, Portland, Sacramento. 8.
Oh,
we have
so
8 disagreements.
We kept the Boston.
Yeah, we kept it.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. That's fine. I'm good with it. I'll stay by it. 8. Do we need one more? That's an even number, so we're likely to go 4 and 4. We have to have an odd number of disagreements.
All right, so
it has to be a winner.
Let's set a total for Minnesota.
Oh, awesome.
Want to go 40 and you go over, I go under?
I'm not going over.
39.5?
Yeah, I'm not taking the over on Minnesota. I don't like Minnesota.
Are you going under?
Yes, I would take the under on Minnesota.
Yeah.
You take the over on Minnesota.
Why don't you go over on the Clips?
I don't like the Clips. I deducted front office points.
I will give you 46 and over for the Clips, and I'll take 46 and under.
46 and over?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll take that.
All right, that'll be our tiebreaker.
Yeah, that's our tiebreaker.
Joe House, let's go feed you. You're like an animal.
I'm starving,
you
by the way.
And then we're gonna go see a
go
preseason
see
basketball game. Yeah, we're taping this on
over.
Monday, but yeah. Joe House, a pleasure. Thank you for your 2.5 hours of over-under time.
I hope America enjoys this holiday.
We should have done the over-under for hours for this podcast. It would have been 2.5, and I think we went over.
Yeah, we get over. Sorry.
Thank you, America. You can actually watch me on the NBA Shoot-Around show. Doubleheader, preseason, October 26th, Friday.
I'll watch.
Miami and New Orleans.
Ooh.
And then you can get to hear me rehash some of these points.
This is great.
And then Denver, Phoenix.
2 very great, interesting games. At this point, everything's interesting.
Denver, Phoenix is kind of half interesting.
You want to see Phoenix, right? We have this perception in our head. Let's go see him play some basketball.
It's going to be me, Jalen, and Wilbon.
Great one.
Yeah. I have a plan. I'm gonna spike Wilbon's drink between the 2 games.
Here's what I'm worried about with you.
Yeah.
Those guys.
Getting punchy?
No. What are you gonna do about the handshake?
I'm working on it. Jalen, I'm going to
handshake lessons.
I'm going to handshake school. Jalen's going to take me to handshake school. We're going to film it for the YouTube channel. I just need to know.
Yeah, you do. Then
Well, it's like dancing. Somebody's got to lead and
There's
somebody's
gotta
got
be a
to
lead
follow.
and
My
follow.
problem is I always try to lead and it goes
Yeah,
bad,
right.
so I'll get it.
Yeah.
What I do now is I just grab a hand, I just pull in
And
for
the
the immediate
chest
chest
bump.
bump. Yeah, that's my
safe.
move.
That's safe.
It's a safe one.
It is.
Do you think once they got Dwight Howard, at that point he was like,
No doubt.
Dwight Howard,
Yeah.
the third best player in the league.
And a rim protector. Phil has always been a much better defensive coach than he's given credit for because everyone focused on the triangle. But I remember one of the first times I ever talked to Jeff Van Gundy after I retired. We talked a lot about those Bulls-Knicks days, and Jeff had a really interesting comment. He said, we never worried about the triangle. We knew we could guard the triangle. What we worried about was trying to score against you guys. And obviously the personnel was amazing with Michael and Scotty and Dennis Rodman and Harper.
And
You had
you.
all these, and me.
And
Yeah, of
Steve
course.
Kerr,
Lockdown
shut down
guy
point
myself.
guards. Yeah.
But that's what Phil's teams were actually known for, and what he loved was having a big defensive center. We never had a dominant offensive center, but we always had big guys. You think about Bill Cartwright or Luke Longley. We always had guys who could kind of anchor the lane. And so when they got Dwight Howard this year, I think it changed everything in terms of Phil's interest in that team. And I think he would have loved to have played Dwight and Gasol together in that triangle and seen how it would have worked.
How fast do you think they could have figured out how to teach that whole team the triangle during the season? How long would that take?
Very quickly. Nash would pick it up in 30 seconds. He's been playing against it forever. And I've heard the argument that you wouldn't be utilizing Nash in the pick and roll game. You can tweak the triangle and run pick and roll very easily out of it if that's what you choose. But he would have picked it up immediately. The offense is really made for Gasol. We've seen that. He hasn't been effective since Phil Jackson left and since he's been out of the triangle. Obviously, Kobe was won 5 rings with it. I think Dwight Howard's perfect for the triangle because you move him around, you post him, you use his just the presence and the target to create offense and create passing and cutting lanes. And there would have been a little bit of an adjustment for some of the guys, but when you already have a core group who's run it and has won titles with it, the adjustment will go much quicker.
So you feel like Phil Jackson would have been the best hire for this team? It sounds like.
I do. He won 5 titles there. I mean, there's such a respect for him, and he's got such an understanding of Gasol and Kobe, and so I thought he was the right choice. With that said, my thought right from the beginning was if they don't get Phil, and I thought it was going to be Phil's choice, but my thought was if Phil says no, D'Antoni is the next guy, and he made the most sense to me as the next option.
Now, explain why. I'm guessing partly because he had great relationships with Nash and Kobe already, but what are the other reasons you thought he would have been a great fit?
The first thing you do is say who's out there, right? And to me, this Laker team had to have an experienced coach, somebody who has had success and been a really good coach in the league. So that list, how many are there? I mean, you think of Stan Van Gundy immediately. Well, obviously that's not going to work with Dwight there. You think of Jeff Van Gundy. Well, cross Jeff off the list because of Stan. I'm probably missing a couple of names, but Phil and Mike were really obvious people on that list. I mean, Phil being the greatest coach of all time, and Mike being a guy who has had a ton of success, has been he hasn't won championships, but he's led teams that made the conference finals, and they've been good. And he's a guy who, you started to say it, the relationships that he has with Steve and Kobe and the Olympic team, and his offense. It's a popular thing with players. So there's a lot to like about him, and a lot that's attractive for the Lakers.
Yesterday was D-Day for the Los Angeles Lakers, a stunning turn of events. Everyone thought they were going to hire Phil Jackson. I thought they were going to hire Phil Jackson. I went to bed on Sunday night. I woke up on Monday morning. They hired Mike D'Antoni. On the phone right now, Grantland's Zach Lowe. Zach, you wrote about this already, but let's rehash your opinions for a podcast.
I was as shocked as you. I woke up early Monday and was told that I needed to write something about Mike D'Antoni being hired, and took a double take and started to think hard about it. I was as surprised as anyone else. I saw some reporters at the Nets game on Sunday. We were talking about this, and a couple had prior connections to LA and that general market, and they, everything they were hearing was that it was just like a matter of hours until Phil cinched it.
This is like one of those stories that I think like 3 weeks from now will make for an awesome 5,000-word magazine feature, like a Vanity Fair style, because there's so many components to it. First of all, you have the Phil Jackson Jimmy Buss part, which basically is brother-in-law. He dates Jim Buss's sister. So obviously they don't have the greatest relationship, because the way this was handled was a little bit of an FU to Phil, but yet the guy is dating Jim Buss's sister. So I think that part's really strange. Then the part that, all right, let me ask you, why would they fire Mike Brown when they did, when they didn't have a backup plan yet? Why do you think they did it after 5 games?
I mean, if you look at what they did, firing a guy 5 games into a season when the point guard they got to run the offense they just installed has basically not played, it's crazy, and it suggests that they probably should have started this process as soon as they got eliminated from the playoffs last year, for the exact reasons that you state. So this doesn't turn into a cluster, what?
Yeah.
With all, I mean, like, if you do it in April or May, you get your ducks in order. You have time to talk to Phil. You have time to look at the market and see what you want to do. And to fire a guy after 5 games, when again, one of the greatest point guards ever, who you brought in to run this brand new offense that you just installed, has basically not played. It's just crazy.
And then on top of it, here's my theory. I think that they had some sort of feeler out to Phil. They knew that Phil was sitting there. Phil didn't want to make it seem like he undercut Mike Brown. So they were like, all right, we'll talk to Phil, whatever, and we won't just say right away that he's the coach. But once Phil had that leverage, and now everyone's claiming that this didn't happen, but I just think it did happen, because something had to have happened over the weekend. Phil knew he had the leverage and probably asked for a whole bunch of crazy stuff. I don't think he totally ever wanted to coach again. I went to lunch with the guy 2 years ago, and it just seemed to me like a guy who had reached the end of the line and just didn't want to do the grind of not just dealing with the schedule and the travel and sitting on the bench, but even, dealing with Kobe as Kobe was hitting a different part of his career. So for me, it seemed like Phil was just saying, well, I'll do this, but, I need this, and this, assuming they were going to say yes. And then for whatever reason, Jimmy Buss said, yeah, screw that. Let's go with D'Antoni. Does that seem plausible to you?
It does. I mean, the reporting coming out of LA has been weirdly divided between, Phil asked for the world as an FU to Jim Buss, and Phil asked for just reasonable stuff and no equity and no organizational control, which suggests that there's a lot of competing agendas that are trying to get stories out to the guys that are on the ground over there. But yeah, I mean, like you say, it just there aren't that many sort of Laker-worthy candidates available for the job mid-season, early in the season, and you would suspect that an organization that has been well run under the Buss family for almost its entire existence would not make such a dramatic decision without knowing they had someone in the bag, or being 90% sure they had one of the only candidates available in the bag, and maybe they thought, we haven't reached out to D'Antoni, but we're pretty sure he'll take the job because he wants to coach again, and that's a good backup. But I don't know that that's the case.
And then on top of that, if you had somebody in the bag, this would be a nice guy to have in the bag. Somebody who is dating a member of the owner's, somebody who's dating the owner's daughter, basically. That's somebody you can trust with the information. Hey, we're thinking of firing Mike Brown. What do you think of this? Would you potentially come back? Yeah, I have to say maybe I would. Okay, well, we're going to fire him. Then you go to him. All right, so what salary are you thinking? Then he throws out all these crazy things and it falls apart. The other weird thing is, from a timing standpoint, it didn't seem like they wanted to play games 6 and 7 with Mike Brown, because those were 2 of the easiest games in the schedule for them. And all that, if they win those 2 games and then lose to San Antonio tonight, then they fire him. Now you've lost a whole other week of trying to find a coach. So it almost seemed like they were being preemptive. Did you feel that?
Well, that was the weird part, is that, the first story that came out was Stein saying, citing sources saying he's got the homestand to essentially save his job. And you looked at that homestand and you thought, he can do that. They should be okay on this homestand. There are some bad teams coming in, Golden State's missing Andrew Bogut, the Kings are the Kings, whatever. And he could save his job. And then all of a sudden, like 2 hours later, he was canned. And it was weird, now that you bring it up, that they just, that maybe they wanted to get it done before the Lakers are sitting there at 3-5 or 4-6 or something that is like borderline acceptable.
And then on top of that, you have, Mike Brown getting blamed for putting the Princeton offense in. Somebody sent me this great link of a whole article that Yahoo had at the end of July, about how Kobe pushed for the Princeton offense. And he had spent all this time with Eddie Jordan and had talked Mike Brown into doing this, and it'd be great for this. There's all these Kobe quotes about how great the offense is going to be. And then I didn't even know this. I thought this was Mike Brown's idea to do this offense. I had no idea this was Kobe was the impetus for this offense. So Kobe convinces the coach to put in an offense that then gets blamed within 5 games after the season started of getting him fired. That's pretty strange.
Yeah, that was a Woj article, and Woj is tight with a lot of people around the NBA, but he's tight with Kobe. We know that, and I remember that piece, and yeah, I mean, it certainly painted. I mean, Kobe was saying, this is my idea. I want something that's like the triangle, and our offense wasn't consistent enough last year. It was too scripted. It wasn't read and react enough, and I think this is going to be a good idea. And now, Eddie Jordan, he's just twiddling his thumbs. He waits for what the hell is going to happen to him.
It's totally bizarre. And then you have the part where Mike D'Antoni, who has, we think, a phenomenal relationship with Nash. I know Nash loved playing for him. And then he has this long history with Kobe, dating back to when Kobe was like a kid and watched him play in Italy. And Kobe, the first number he wore was D'Antoni's number. So there's that. He dealt with Dwight, obviously, with the Olympic team in 2008. Gasol. I mean, wouldn't you say Gasol would be, if you're looking about the dream D'Antoni offense, Gasol would be maybe the best ever version of what Boris Diaw did for them that one year. On paper, this makes a lot of sense. I don't know why the Laker fans don't totally see that. It was like they were just totally enamored by the concept of Phil coming back. Do you think D'Antoni's a better fit for them than Jackson?
I mean, probably not. Phil is Phil. He has 11 rings. He knows the market. He knows Kobe. He has everyone's trust. And Gasol, I think, is probably better even for the triangle than he is for the D'Antoni offense, just because, he can't shoot threes like Diaw. He's not sort of an off-the-dribble guy who can attack in space like Diaw. I actually think the Lakers have some serious spacing issues, because to me, Gasol is this, and we've talked about this. Gasol is a center, and he's playing with another center. And without Odom there to sort of break that up, not that they could use the current version of Odom, obviously, but without Odom there to break that up, like they used to, finish down the stretch with Odom, Gasol. That was their front line. And so they have some serious spacing issues. Like Phil gets the benefit of the doubt if you're comparing them head to head, because he's Phil. At the same time, I think Mike D'Antoni is a very, very good coach. And, watching them run the Princeton and these slow old guys cutting and screening for 16 seconds of the shot clock, you would just want to scream at the TV, just run a pick and roll with Nash and Howard, or just give the ball to Gasol in the post against Jay Crowder or something like that. And if we build around Nash and Howard, I think they'll be, they can figure everything else around that.
The stats weren't as bad as people thought about how their offense. So what were they, like sixth? Something like that in those 5 games? Yeah,
they were 6, but they had 2 really good games, including just a destruction of the Pistons, and 3 really bad ones. I mean, it was a problem. It was a problem.
Yeah. For me, it was more of an eye test thing. It just didn't feel right when you watched it. And, I love using stats. I love reading them. I love seeing whether they're confirming what I see, or maybe they don't confirm what I'm watching. But in this case, the team just didn't look right, and it didn't look like the right offense. Nash not being there, didn't help. But when you look forward with this team, first of all, this is a little more dysfunction than I think we've seen with the Lakers, maybe since the heyday of the whole Shaq Kobe thing when that blew up. just really strange to me how they handled this. I know, Jerry Buss we haven't heard from, and I know like he's been in the hospital, and I don't think he's in the best health. And it does seem like this was a Jim Buss production. I wonder, if you just look at the landscape of this team and all these contracts they have coming up. Kobe, is going to make $30 million next year. Gasol's in the last year of his contract next year. Howard's a free agent this year. The way they handled this makes me wonder, could this be the first sign that maybe the Lakers aren't as stable of a franchise as they used to be in the past? What do you think?
I don't even think it's the first sign. I mean, it was crazy how aggressively Jim Buss just like purged everything that Phil Jackson had ever touched from that organization, knowing that it was going to alienate Kobe, knowing that it was going to make people say, what the hell is going on there? Why is there this power play? Why is Ronnie Lester out? Why is the training staff and the video guy, why are they out? Not all the training staff, obviously Gary Vitti is still there. But, why are all these changes happening? And this is sort of, a year later or whatever, we're seeing some sort of similar weird power play dynamics, playing out and we'll see what happens. I mean, this season is like, when is Nash going to come back? He has a freaking broken leg. When is Howard going to start playing defense like himself? I mean, we're going to be 30 games into the season before you know it, and it's like, are they going to look like the team that anyone thought they would be?
And they have no bench whatsoever. That's I don't think any of us realized that Jameson was going to be this old, for lack of a better word. I thought Jameson was going to be good for them. And they just have no young legs, which makes me think like if they have to make a move, if there's like a win now mentality, and I think there is, especially because Howard's going to be a free agent, and you definitely don't want to screw up the season because he could just leave. It makes me wonder, like, could Gasol be traded? And we know there's a very easy trade that makes a lot of sense sitting out there. Josh Smith, Kyle Korver, Johan Petro's contract coming to LA for Gasol. Atlanta would save $2.7 million. They wouldn't have to worry about re-signing Josh Smith this summer, which who knows if they can or they can't. They'd have Gasol under contract for this year and next. I don't know if they're better with that trade, but I think it's a really fair haul for Josh Smith. Would you make that trade if you're Atlanta?
Wow. That would be, I mean, I'd have to sit down and look at the cap math. I mean, that you put in Jeff Teague's cap hold with Horford and Gasol, and I think you could probably still get something like max cap room if you even want it with Gasol, but it's a little tighter than it would be, otherwise. But I think he's a better player. He's clearly a better player than Josh Smith. But I like Josh Smith, even though he's a bonehead. And if you have ambitions of getting any of these big guys, and he's friends with Dwight. He's obviously tight with Chris Paul, and I think that they view him as a valuable thing for that reason. But Powell is old. Let's not beat around the bush. He's got a lot of minutes on his legs. I don't know that I want that salary on the books for the next couple of years.
Well, it's this year and next year, and then he's done.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I guess it becomes an expiring contract right away, almost.
Well, then you think like, all right, you're in the Eastern Conference, which is a really small conference for the most part. You suddenly have Gasol and Horford together. Think about a team like the Celtics trying to match up with that. The Celtics would have a lot of trouble. I think Miami would have a lot of trouble matching up with that. Both of us watched the incredible Memphis-Miami game on Sunday night, which, the first time where the small ball Miami was playing hard in that game. It's the first time where small ball Miami kind of looked at it and went, uh-oh. Now here's a team that it almost seemed like a little too big for Miami. If you put Horford and Gasol, you built around that with some of the shooters they have, and Jeff Teague, I like that Atlanta team anyway, but I think that'd be a pretty intriguing team.
That would be a very intriguing team. The thing you like about Smith is they can swing him to small forward and play bigger in a way they wouldn't be able to do in this Gasol scenario. But I think, at the very least, I think they would be just as good and with a bigger guy in the right matchup and just a smarter player. Smith is a great passer, obviously. He's a better defensive player, but Gasol is just such a headier offensive player who's not going to waste 5 possessions a night with bad shots. It might be a net win for them.
And then if you put Josh Smith on the Lakers, so I guess he'd be, if you're looking at it like the mid-2000s Suns. Nash is Nash. Josh Smith, kind of in that Sean Marion role, right? High-flying, power forward, whatever. Obviously never had anybody like Dwight Howard on those Suns teams. And then Kobe also really had no, I guess maybe Joe Johnson that first year, but he's, such a different player. But Josh Smith, Nash, and Howard in the D'Antoni offense would be really interesting. Especially if they really started running, if Howard's back came back, that would be a genuinely exciting team.
It would be super exciting, and then Smith, as you say, is much more able to do things off the dribble and slash from the baseline and stuff than Powell is. He also can't shoot, which brings some of the same spacing issues. But it's also possible for him to play a little bit of three if that works better. If Meta World Peace is just a disaster, or just can fill more spots around the floor. But again, the lack of shooting would be a problem, and and then of course you go forward and you've got Smith on an expiring contract, White on an expiring contract, Nash is almost 40. You introduce a little more uncertainty long term with that deal.
Yeah, the Lakers love betting on that though, because once people get here, they don't want to leave. The one thing with Dwight, I do think there's a little urgency there because you have two real suitors for him this summer. You have the Mavericks, obviously, and then actually I should say you have three suitors. And we found out that he had a crush on Brooklyn. He finally admitted it. Mm-hmm. And they do have tradable pieces. Like, it's not inconceivable that they could try to get some sign and trade. They made the sign and trade rules a little tougher, but I think Houston has to be considered another possible suitor for him, especially I think they have max money this summer.
For Howard, they have to work. It's going to be very hard. I don't know. I'd have to do the math. I mean, they're tight with the Smith level max. They have to drop like a Marcus Morris and maybe even another little piece to get the Smith level max. And Howard's deal starts at like $20 million, so it might be tough for them to get in that market.
Yeah, but add this part though. You're not going to have a Sheik and Howard, so you move a Sheik at that point.
True.
You sign Howard, you move a Sheik, and a Sheik has turned into one of the, I think one of the best bargains in the league. The guy's probably going to lead the league in rebounding. He's top 3 or 4 with how he protects the rim. He's got no hands on the other side, but I think
that makes him hilarious to watch.
Yeah,
which adds value for us anyway.
But when you think about some of these extensions that we've seen, like DeMar DeRozan for, what did he get, $40 million?
Yeah.
Even Taj Gibson for $40 million. Ashiq for $24.7 for 3 years was a steal. It's a hijacking. And I think that's one of the most tradable contracts in the league this summer. So the point is, Howard, there's a couple teams that I think, if he didn't want to stay in the Lakers, if this season went terribly, he'd have some options. I mean, I still think the Lakers made the right deal, especially with Bynum's not coming back till January now. So
you make that deal in a heartbeat, and I think you got to throw in Atlanta too as a Dwight suitor, given his connections to the area and their potential cap room.
Now, could they re-sign Josh Smith and sign Howard? I think they can, right?
It's difficult, but they'd have to drop Teague, and they may have to even move Lou Williams. That is very close, because once you start adding up the charges for roster spots and stuff, it gets pretty tight. But I think it's doable. I'd have to sit down and do the math. If it's not doable, it's close to doable, depending on what Smith would get. But again, that gives you Smith, Horford, Howard, and I don't know that works that well.
Well, I was going to say that's another team that you have to factor in that they'd probably make a trade. And right. Horford has real value, I think. I think he's. I haven't done my trade value list yet, but he'd be in the top 25 or 30, I would guess, and I'm sure they could flip him into another piece. Do you feel like there's going to be some trades coming up? For some reason, I feel like I'm getting like a trade vibe for these next couple months. You look around at some of these rosters, and it does feel like, put it this way, you can go on the trade machine for 8 hours and really have some fun with some of these rosters.
You could. Depending on how some teams do. I mean, if Toronto falls apart, they're 1-6 and they're going on the road for something like 12 their next 16 games. They fall out of the playoff race. They've got some pieces. Utah's got a crowded front court.
Yeah.
Memphis, Memphis looks really good, so that probably takes them out of the trade market. But some of those teams will be aggressive depending on how their seasons go, for sure.
Memphis has. After that Miami game, I actually went on the trade machine to try to figure out, because they feel like they're one player away, and I don't know what happened to Tony Allen this year, but he's not. They're not either they're using him wrong or he's not as good or whatever. But like he only played 14 minutes on Sunday night. I think he's an expiring at 3.3. They have Spates who makes $4 million, so you could combine those two and get one more big piece. But you wrote about the Grizzlies, I think, for Grantland today. It hasn't gone up yet, but from what you saw on Sunday night, that's a real contender. Do you agree?
That's the thing. I'm not even sure they're one player away anymore. They were definitely one player away before the Harden trade and before the Lakers went to crap. Not that the Lakers have permanently gone to crap, but they're certainly not we can't just write them in as like a juggernaut.
They're much iffier. For a gloomy Monday here in Southern California, it's almost like the weather has assumed the mood of Laker fans, although they did win last night. Wanted to mention I'm hosting PTI today with Michael Wilbon, which comes on at 5:30 on ESPN if you want to see me and Wilbon argue with each other for a half hour. But right now you get to listen to me argue with Zach Lowe from Grantland.com. What's happening?
I'm doing well. How you doing?
It's quite a day to be hosting PTI between the Masters and Kobe and then Dwight and the Lakers, and that Lakers game last night. Parker was terrible, and Popovich even benched him because he was terrible. But I thought the Lakers played really well. And you look at what happened. They had a little Twin Towers action going, and you can kind of see why the Spurs were navigating out of that one spot because they didn't want to play the Lakers. What did you think?
The Lakers looked huge last night, and I don't know if it was a function of sort of. Obviously, they were playing the Twin Towers, and the Spurs' offense has been sputtering a little bit in the last 10 days or so with Tony Parker clearly not himself. And sometimes, it's funny, if their perimeter guys aren't totally on their game, it looks a little tight out there sometimes with Splitter and Duncan or Blair and Duncan, guys who don't have three-point range. So I agree. The Lakers, there were arms everywhere. Tony Parker couldn't get to the rim. It was interesting. We got a nice old school big man duel with those Tim Duncan slams in the last few minutes. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, this is a whole other subject completely, but our ballots are due this week for all NBA and all that stuff. And I'm really torn. I had Marc Gasol in there for that center spot for a long time. But watching Duncan last night, I was thinking, why wouldn't I put Tim Duncan as my first team all NBA center? Talk me out of that.
Well, I think the only issue with Duncan is minutes. And I don't have this number. I can look up the numbers now, how many more minutes Gasol has played than Duncan. I suspect it's a few hundred at least. And that adds up. And that's the problem with Duncan. Yeah, he's actually about 700 more minutes than Duncan. And when you start thinking about how many games that's equivalent to, that's a lot. And that matters. And that's my problem with Duncan's candidacy, both for MVP, where he's in that sort of 4 or 5 conversation. And, I've been talking to people around the league in preparation for filling out my fake ballot because, of course, I don't have a real one like some people.
What? You don't have a ballot?
I don't have a ballot, man.
Well, this was your FU NBA season for getting a ballot. I can't believe you don't have a ballot. Why didn't you tell me that? I'll get you a ballot. It should happen.
The ballot rules are Byzantine, and there's local fiefdoms involved. I don't care. My point is this. I was talking to one guy today, and he said something interesting. If Duncan is better, if Duncan is an A and Marc Gasol is an A-, you'd still rather have the A- guy if you have him for 700 more minutes than the A guy, if that makes sense. And that's the problem with Duncan's candidacy in general.
It's a great point, and you just also illuminated my issue with PER, because I don't think PER takes into account the fact that it's much harder to play 38 to 42 minutes a game than it is to play 15 minutes a game or even 30 minutes a game, and especially remember when the sabermetric movement was taking off for basketball a couple years ago and everybody had to crap on Allen Iverson's MVP season from 2001. And meanwhile, he's playing 44 minutes a game, taking every shot. He was the only offensive threat on that team. And, I think sometimes that's for me when stats can go wrong sometimes. But I agree with you. Marc Gasol 40 minutes a night, basically, the entire season. He's been a rock, heart of the defense. That's the case for him. I was just thinking Duncan last night. Some of those moves he was doing, it was like 2003 Timmy. I was shocked.
Those dunks were awesome, and they were emphatic and in people's faces, and like just that arm extended and ripping the rim down. It was a great time. Howard Duncan was a great time last night. But yeah, the Lakers looked good. Duncan looked good. I don't really buy that the Spurs really care who they play, although I don't think they're upset if they get Golden State over the Lakers. Certainly, they just need to. The Spurs need. That's like the quiet story right now. The Spurs need to get right. Like Diaw's out, Ginobili. No one knows when he's coming back. Parker is working his way back. That's not a small story.
Yeah, I wouldn't even say it's quiet. I don't think they look right. And I think from a public perception, for people who aren't watching the league week after week after week after week like we are, there's this idea in your head that it's Duncan, Parker, and Ginobili and Popovich, and they'll be fine. But the reality is Ginobili's not that guy anymore, and we don't even know if he's going to be in the playoffs. Parker has been up and down from a health standpoint. And what they're going to need from Duncan in the playoffs, he's not going to be able to get away with 27 minutes a game in the playoffs or whatever. Now is the time where he's got to start playing 38. I also don't trust. I like all of their role guys, but after the last two playoffs, I'm not sure. Do you trust any of them?
Well, I mean, the Matt Bonner playoff disappearance is an annual tradition at this point, a tradition unlike any other.
Yes.
Splitter was out of the rotation by the end of that Thunder series last year. That's just not an option this year, period. The surprise classic Spursian last-minute waiver of Steven Jackson is, probably a non-issue, but does impact their ability to play small ball if that becomes a necessity. It's just one fewer rangy, tall wing player. Yeah, and they need to be, they need to be clicking on all cylinders. And I was looking at numbers this morning since February 1st, which is 35 games or 33 games. Duncan and Parker have only played 370 minutes together, which sounds like a lot, but isn't for almost half the season. And they've been very good in those minutes, but they've just one is hurt, then the other's hurt. And, we just haven't seen the Spurs. And maybe that's a reason for optimism. But to me, it's a reason for concern. Like they're trying to sort of, after taking a lot of time off from being the Spurs, they have to be the Spurs now.
Yeah, you just made the case for Popovich to be a top 3 coach of the year candidate because they're going to get to 60 wins. I forget what the exact number is, but the amount of time Parker, Ginobili, and Duncan have all been on the court together, it's not a big number. And they're going to they have 58 wins right now. They're going to somehow get to 60. I want to talk about that Laker game that last night from this perspective. I thought what D'Antoni did or what D'Antoni allowed to happen with Kobe over the last couple weeks and the Achilles injury, which everybody says is a fluke injury. I just don't believe it. I was watching that game. He took 2 really hard falls during the game. He looked gassed for the entire game. He was coming off the 48 minutes on the second night of a back-to-back in Portland. And I think they wore him down. I really do. And here's the problem. You watch what happened last night. They've had Gasol now looking very Pau Gasol-ish for about 2.5 weeks. And you can't tell me that they couldn't have gone Twin Towers for 2 6-minute stretches in each half and given Kobe a rest because it's year 17 for him. He's played over 1,460 games or something, including playoffs. The whole thing about, hey, we got to make the playoffs. We got to do what we got to do. I thought it was so short-sighted and so stupid and so counterproductive, and I just think he should get fired. What is your take on what happened?
Fired is strong for me, but I do think it's bad coaching because just sort of coaching 101 is you can't play your players into the ground, and you need to find a way to survive 5-minute stretches with suboptimal lineups. And there are 2 anecdotes I was thinking of this morning in preparation for this. Is the 2011 playoffs, the Mavs were borderline comatose when Dirk was not on the floor. But Dirk can't play 48 minutes. Now Dirk's a big guy, he's not Kobe, it's a whole separate thing. But Rick Carlisle was just committed. This is the minutes cap. It's 36 minutes, whatever it is. and we're just going to cobble together Brian Cardinal and Peja Stojakovic and J.J. Barea and, like, whatever, Sean Marion at the floor, and, like, whatever we need to do to just hold the fort so Dirk can rest and we only lose by 2 points or 3 points in that stretch, and it worked. And then I was at the Knicks game yesterday when Melo got bruised up by David West and J.R. Smith was taking his rest in the fourth quarter. And the Knicks, in a game they didn't really need to win but still wanted to win, put out this, like, grotesque lineup at the start of the fourth quarter, a lineup that just should have failed horribly. Felton was the best player and the only guy capable of creating a shot. And, like, Woodson just let it roll. He's like, we're up by 8. I'm just going to let this roll. Felton made, like, a crazy off-the-dribble 3. Suddenly you're up by 11, and you're like, you know what, we're fine. We're going to go forward with this as long as we can. And sometimes Steve Blake will hit a crazy 3. Gasol will get an and one. Like, you have to just say, we can survive. And at the worst that happens is maybe we get outscored by 3 points. Big whoops. I agree it was bad coaching. Whether it caused the injury is an area that I'm not as prepared as you are to go.
Yeah, well, I'm prepared to go there because the amount of minutes that he played, and I think every game was over 40. He had 247s, 248s. I thought it was insane. And it reminded me of watching an action movie where somebody is revving the car and the guy in the passenger's going, no, man, you're going to blow the engine. It's like, no, we got to get there. And just all of a sudden it's 120 miles an hour and steam's coming out of the engine. I watched that entire Warriors game from beginning to end. And I was on Coward's show on Friday morning. We were talking about how D'Antoni had run Amari into the ground 2 years before, which was a similar thing. If you remember, Amari had that stretch where he was playing 43, 44, 45 minutes a night and then broke down. I just think NBA players need rest. I think the sport is too physical. They play too many games per week. And what bothers me is it's so easy to get those guys the rest with the way the TV timeouts are structured, right? Like you have a TV timeout at the end of the 3-minute mark in the first quarter and the third quarter. You have a break at the end of the period. Then you have another TV timeout at the 10-minute mark of the second quarter. And realistically, you can sit a guy after that 3-minute mark in the first quarter all the way through to after the 10-minute timeout in the second quarter, and you can do the same thing in the second half. You can get them 5 minutes of rest, but also 3 timeouts during that rest. Like you can really regroup during that time. And it's amazing to me that anyone would play anyone 48 minutes a game in the NBA. I just don't understand it. That was one of the dumbest things I've ever seen.
Especially on national TV games, which a lot of the Laker games are, you get even longer commercial breaks than you get on the League Pass games. And look, I agree, it's crazy, and lots of people have written about it. The NBA is a faster, more frenetic, more demanding game now. And this, again, Pop has been years ahead of everyone else on this. You can't run guys into the ground. I don't care if you're going for the 8th seed or whatever. It was bad coaching. And I generally think Mike D'Antoni's a decent coach, but that was bad coaching. The jump I'm not prepared to make is that it contributed to the injury. What I will say is it doesn't help. Like there's no argument. If it didn't contribute to the injury, it certainly doesn't help, both because he's on the court all the time and because, there are some injuries. People are telling me the Achilles is not one of them, where fatigue and, muscle fatigue sort of influences the way that you move and influences the condition of your muscles in the moment in a way that makes some ligament injuries more likely. But the Achilles might be a separate thing, but I think everyone can agree it didn't help. The minutes didn't help, that's for sure.
Well, I think of the body like a building, and structurally you need to be okay. Once that structure gets messed with, and you might have, like Kobe took 2 hard falls in that game. Once, let's say your right knee starts hurting, your left foot starts hurting. Once that balance gets screwed up, it opens the door for a bunch of other injuries. And this is like, I played sports my whole life. When your body gets tired, your right leg starts feeling a little sore. You start compensating for that. You start running a little differently. It just opens the door for all these other things that could happen. And that's the part I don't feel like, most people don't understand. Like Kobe was breaking down during that game. He took a hard fall twice. And the first time he did it was like, oh my God, he blew out his knee. And then he got up, he limped around. And I just think you got to take care of these guys, especially it's a 100-game season. Kobe played Team USA last year, year 17. He's grinding it out. Like even the only comparison to the kind of minutes he was logging this year, and this is something we looked up when we were preparing for Wednesday's ESPN show. So we were like, oh my God, Kobe's playing an insane amount of minutes. He was like second in the league on Wednesday night. And we were like, who else has even played minutes like this? The only guy we could find was Karl Malone. And if you remember what Jerry Sloan used to do with Karl Malone and John Stockton, remember he used to have that specific minutes where they would come out at specific times of the game, each half. And he was able to, whatever minute strategy he used, he was able to exact incredible careers out of those guys. And, I think if you just leave players up to their own devices, they're going to make the wrong choice. Like, yeah, I could let my dog decide how much food he's going to eat every day. He's going to just keep eating. You can't let Kobe Bryant decide how many minutes he's going to play because he's the most competitive guy in the league. He's going to want to keep playing. And you have to, as a coach, say, stop it. You have to listen to me. We need you to play 37 minutes a game. And the other thing is, they could have gone low with Gasol for those 5-minute stretches, right? Gasol is still at the point in his life where he's commanding double teams, and I think that's the part people are missing here. They had other options than Kobe to score. I don't get it. I'm just confused by the whole thing.
I want to say three things. The first thing is I was talking to some medical people yesterday, and they all insist that there's no proof yet that an Achilles rupture can happen because you're overcompensating for other stuff, that it's not that kind of an overcompensation injury. That said, what we don't know about injuries still outweighs what we know. So no, you can't say anything with certainty. Second thing is that, as I've already said, they absolutely had to buy Kobe 5 to 6 minutes of rest here or there, and you can do it. You can survive. The NBA is a survival league. Teams will miss 2 or 3 shots in a row. Suddenly 2 minutes have gone off the clock and nothing bad has happened to you. You have to take the risk that nothing bad will happen to you, if that makes any sense. And the third point, I already have forgotten what it is, but it was a really great point, and I don't remember what it is anymore.
Well, I'm going to make it for you. I'm going to step in with your third point. When you're playing somebody 48 minutes a game, you're also implicitly delivering a message to your role guys, and you're saying this: you guys suck. You guys suck so much that we have to play this guy 48 minutes a game because I literally can't afford to play you guys for 3 minutes a half. From a confidence standpoint, you're kicking all of them in the balls. And that was one of the things that I think is, you mentioned how Woodson yesterday, he tried to make do with that lineup for 3 minutes. What a lot of times happens in the NBA is the guys will rise to the occasion and they get excited. And it's so out of the ordinary that, it can actually be productive and not counterproductive. And that was another thing that I just didn't see from D'Antoni this year. I just think he's done an awful job. And people, I get emails and people are like, why do you hate on D'Antoni? I'm just like, look, I'm just judging him from what I'm watching. I thought he did a great job in Phoenix in 04 through 07. I thought those teams were coached really well. I thought he did a bad job with the Knicks. I thought he did an awful job this year. He lost Gasol in the first 2 weeks. He didn't have to. He could not figure out how to juggle shots for all these guys. He didn't really, keep any sort of a semblance of a rotation. And then he ran Kobe to the ground. And go ahead.
You can get by in the NBA with the Bobcats for 4 minutes if you're facing another team's second unit or another team's, one starter plus 4 bench guys. This is to your point, like, can you survive with pounding the ball to Gasol and like Blake, Jameson, Clark, whatever, world peace? Yes, you can. If you play that lineup strategically, you'll be fine. You can play the Bobcats for 4 minutes and be fine. You can't play the Bobcats for 40 minutes and be fine. And the other thing that drives me crazy is this idea that Kobe controls his playing time. You can't say no to Kobe. Look, Kobe is a pain in the ass. I'm sure he was demanding to play, but, Tony Parker demands to play, and he doesn't have any authority. Tony Parker, there's been clips of him saying, come on, Pop, I've only played 29 minutes. I'm fine. Put me back out there. And for the most part, Pop is like, forget it. You're sitting on the bench. Like, you're the coach. You have to be empowered. Your organization has to empower you to say no to a player who is 35 or 34 or whatever Kobe is and playing 47 minutes every night. I don't buy, Mike D'Antoni, someone needs to step up and fill that power void because Kobe cannot be dictating what his minutes are, just as a head coach shouldn't always be dictating what the GM does, and players shouldn't be dictating what the GM does and who the team signs unless they're Chris Paul and things like that. It's like, I don't buy this idea that Mike D'Antoni was just powerless to cut Kobe's minutes.
Yeah, and if he was, then he should just quit. Because if you have a job where you have zero power, then what's the fun of even having that job other than getting the paychecks? And he was compensated handsomely with the Knicks, so it's not like he needed the money. What you just spoke of was something that we touched on in the ABC show yesterday, and we just didn't have enough time to get into it. For me, this was an infrastructure problem. And this goes back to Jimmy Buss. This goes back to Dr. Jerry Buss getting, phasing out because of his health the last couple of years, and just a void of leadership on this team. And when Jimmy Buss had the decision, everybody pointed this out this weekend. Phil never would have let this happen to Kobe, et cetera, et cetera. But you really can go back to that decision as kind of the turning point for this franchise, where he picked a coach who ended up within 5 months had no power and had his star player telling him how many minutes he's going to play. A GM who also didn't have the power to tell this coach what to do. To tell the best player what to do. A coaching system that had nothing in common with the players that this guy had. And it took him 6 months to really realize that he had immense physical advantages playing Gasol and Howard at the same time. You saw it last night. And then, on top of that, just from a long-term strategy, where is this team going and who's making the decisions? Like, let's say they re-sign Dwight Howard for $117 million. And now they have Gasol for $19 million. Now they have this amnesty decision with Kobe. It'll cost another, I think, $80 million or something in luxury tax just to bring him back. Do you trust the decision-making powers that are in place to make the right decisions here? Because I don't.
We live in a crazy world where the same coach can bench Pau Gasol repeatedly for Anton Jamison, but can't get Kobe 6 minutes of rest.
Right.
That's crazy to me. And Gasol is not on Kobe's stature, especially in Los Angeles, but he's still Pau Gasol, and he's sitting there being benched for a marginal player who can't guard anyone at any position repeatedly, and you can't cut 6 minutes from Kobe's minutes count on a game-to-game basis. I don't know I am thankfully unaware of all the internal mess with the Buss family. I'm willfully unaware. I don't want to know very much about how crazy that is. But yeah, going forward, they have some interesting decisions. I don't think amnestying Kobe is really something that they'll do. But the cost savings are enormous, although not as enormous as some of the numbers that have been thrown around, because they still have to pay his salary and they'd still have to replace him with, players that would probably add up to 10 million or so. The savings would still be substantial, probably something like 30 or 40 million, but it's not like an 80, 90, $100 million savings once you start doing all the calculations. And you can save a much smaller amount of money by amnestying Meta World Peace. But again, they're still a shallow team and there's still half a roster to fill around whatever is left over.
Well, if you amnesty Kobe, so he makes $30 million next year, 80% gets covered by insurance. So if you keep him on the team, 80% of $30 million is 24, but he would cost $80 million in luxury tax fees, plus the $6 million you're paying. So it would be around 60. But if you're amnestying him, that makes it, as Tom Ziller pointed out this weekend, makes it really hard to bring him back if you're over the cap. Now you can only pay him $2.5 million for the 2014-15 season. My question is, if you're amnestying him, you're basically saying this guy isn't coming back at the same level he was at. And that is really the sleeping part of this whole Kobe story that everybody is really, I don't feel like is concentrating on enough. We've never really seen anybody come back at full speed from this injury. We haven't seen anybody come back 100%. We've seen it derail multiple careers, and this is going back. Tiny Archibald in the late 70s, who was one of the best point guards in the league. I think he missed 2 years with this injury. The science is better now, but you look at somebody like Elton Brand, who was just never, ever, ever the same after he had this injury. Chauncey Billups, a year later, still can't come back, who's in the relative NBA mileage stage that Kobe was in. Isaiah Thomas did it, didn't even bother trying to come back. Dominique did it, came back 50% of what he was. Memo Orcord did it, never really had a relevant NBA moment again. I don't think people realize how devastating this injury is. I know people have seem to think like he's superhuman, he'll be able to come back, but man, I think it's far fetched. I'm not saying he can't do it, but it would be one of the most incredible physical things that anybody's done in the NBA. If he comes back at the level he was at before this injury, it would be unbelievable.
Yeah, the Lakers are in an interesting spot where there's no reason why they wouldn't have as much cap room almost as they would want after this theoretical Kobe amnesty, because the only guy on the books right now for 2014 is Nash. You add in a max salary for Howard, you still have as much cap room as you want to offer Kobe almost whatever he wants, other than you might even be able to get his max salary based on what he makes now underneath the cap, depending on what happens. But the other thing, the flip side of that is, do you want as a franchise to make decisions this summer and at the trade deadline next season based on the idea of paying a 36-year-old Kobe Bryant coming off an Achilles tear whatever he wants? That's not something I'd be comfortable with.
No, and this is the piece that I feel like didn't get enough play this weekend. This is now a 4 or 5 year decision you're making, because you could basically just say, and it's cold. It's a cold decision, but this is a franchise that did it with Shaq. When Shaq had outlived his usefulness, they made the choice. They got rid of him. Kobe's a different scenario because he played for so many more years. He's so popular with the fan base. But if it comes down to a situation where in September they're looking at this and they're saying, this guy's not coming back until mid-March, we're probably not even a playoff team without him. If we throw away this year, we save $80 million. We fired D'Antoni. We bring in Phil Jackson. We make it pretty clear that we're making a run at LeBron James in the summer of 2014, and we're moving forward with Dwight Howard and the hope of LeBron James. I think the Laker fans would be bummed out about Kobe, but it's hard to argue against the logic of that decision versus Plan B, which is you pay $80 million or $60 or whatever it turns out being in the luxury tax to keep Kobe around, to give yourself a chance to pay him. What's he going to want? 15, 16 in year, it'll be year 19 for him coming off Achilles. Where are you going with that? Like, these are real decisions. And this goes back to my question. Who's making them? Do you trust Jimmy Buss to make this decision? Cause I don't. I think this is going to be a fascinating summer. The other part we haven't even talked about yet. If you're Dwight Howard, what do you do?
Well, I'm working under a couple of assumptions. Number one, Dwight Howard will take the max from the Lakers, period. And number two, there is the middle way here where you just keep Kobe on the books. You amnesty Meta World Peace to sort of eat away at the luxury tax bill a little bit. And you keep Kobe, see what he gives you in 2014, and then, or 2013, the next season, and then go into the summer with the same cap flexibility you've got on the books now. You've got to renounce Kobe's rights and some things like that, and just sort of see what Kobe has looked like for that season, see what price he's willing to come back at, and see who else you might be able to get around him and Dwight. And I think that's probably the most likely course, just because, Kupchak was honest yesterday. They haven't even thought about amnestying Kobe, and I don't think politically that might not be viable for them. But I think that middle way is even though it's expensive and costly compared to amnestying Kobe, I think that's the most likely scenario. Then you still have to rebuild the team around Dwight Howard going forward, and you risk that Kobe does come back next season and looks horrible for 2 months, or looks like a shell of himself for 2 months, and then you don't know how to handle that in the summer. And then again, that brings up, who's empowered to do what once those big decisions really come to roost, because that middle way is just delaying the big decision in a way.
Right. So I think they're at the point with the luxury tax where every dollar they're over, it's worth $3 because they're a repeat offender. I forget how it works. So conceivably, you could say, we're not amnestying Kobe. We're going to let insurance pay 80% of his contract. Instead, we're going to amnesty Artest, who I think makes $8 million next year. That would be $24 million in luxury tax we'd save there, plus another 24 in Kobe's salary. So maybe financially it's not as big of a hit as it would seem on paper. The question is, what do I want to pay Kobe in year 19? And also, if I'm building around Dwight and Nash, I don't have a choice. I'm stuck with Nash in summer 2014. And then I try to get LeBron, I guess. I guess I'm trying to bring back Kobe. I don't know what he'd want at this point. Maybe the other part with Kobe, if they brought him back, that's a $30 million expiring contract they'd have for a trade, right? That'd be pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's almost too big of a salary because there are just so few salaries that are even in that stratosphere anymore because it's like 2 collective bargaining agreements ago, just multiplied over that effect, and those contracts aren't really possible anymore. Yeah, I mean, they're not in the repeater phase yet because they are in year 2 and they'll hit it again next year. That'll be 3, and then they're slated to be under in 2014 if they do, or in 2015 rather, if they do their business correctly. So they have to worry about it a little bit as sort of an off in the distance thing, but they're not in 4 years and 5 years, 4 and 5 territory yet. But yeah, I mean, look, these are all, it would be very easy with a giant contract for Dwight and Nash still on the books and a giant contract for Kobe to be right back up there again.
And if I'm Dwight, I'm looking at this situation. I don't know when Kobe's coming back. This Gasol thing only recently started working out in about the last week. I'm playing with a coach that really didn't figure out totally how to use me for the entire season. Ton of pressure. I've never faced pressure like this before. I have the worst set of guards without Kobe in the league, especially if Nash can't ever get back to where he was, which is looking increasingly doubtful. And I could have this situation, or I could just go to Houston and play with James Harden, where there's no state tax. And the difference between the extra money the Lakers can give him versus what you save in taxes with Houston is not really that dramatically different. That Houston team is built a lot like his 2009 Magic team. From a basketball standpoint, you could argue he'd actually be smarter to go to Houston. Now, I think he'd take an incredible amount of heat, but can't we at least throw out Houston as a semi-decent alternative here for him?
Oh, there's no question that the Rockets are going to go after him. And they've got to do some cap stuff to get enough room to offer him the max, and they can do those kinds of things, minor moves here and there. And they would probably have to move Ashik in either a sign and trade with Dwight or a separate deal somewhere down the line, because I just don't think that the two can play together.
That's super doable, though.
Oh, super doable. Ashik's on a great. The quiet thing about those Ashik Lin contracts is like they're only 3-year deals. They're like over already. If people who are planning long-term cap stuff, those deals are like over. They don't even care. Super doable to move him. You're right that the Rockets, I think, envision sort of a 3 inside out, 1 in, 4 out system. Lots of threes, lots of running that would suit Dwight fine, and they're going to go after him. And yeah, you look at the Lakers. I think you have to assume Nash will never be Nash again. I think you have to assume, as you said, that Kobe will never be this Kobe again. You would probably assume that even without an injury. He's 34. 35, 36, 37 are dangerous years for a lot of players. And if you're Dwight looking at that scenario, you're really at that point banking on the allure of Los Angeles getting you a second and third guy. And although history suggests they will do that, a bird in the hand is worth whatever that saying is, right? I mean, Houston is Houston. The core is there.
The only way LA could do this, and I'm not saying they will, but this is the blueprint. You amnesty Kobe because you just say, like, look, this guy wasn't playing next year. This is a 12-month injury. He would have been back in April, if that. He's been in the league for 18 years. The odds of him coming back were about 3%. I don't care how competitive and how much of a hard worker he is. It just wasn't happening. So you amnesty him. You turn the team around. You give the team to Dwight. You get rid of D'Antoni. You bring in Phil Jackson, who is just the Red Auerbach of the West Coast out here, just beloved. You say, we have a plan. We're building around Dwight. We're building around Powell. We're building around the chance that Kobe comes back a year from now and plays at a reduced price. And we're going to make a run at the summer 2014 free agent class. Everybody in the league thinks that there are 3 teams for LeBron. He can stay in Miami and go for the dynasty. He can go back to Cleveland for the redemption story. Or if he wants to be the first billion-dollar athlete ever, he goes to the Lakers. And that's the third phase of his career. Los Angeles, Hollywood, the whole thing, being the guy who takes the torch of the Lakers. These are the 3 options for him. So if the Lakers sold this the right way, I think their fans would forgive them at least a little bit for making the decision with Kobe, which, as we discussed, is a really cold decision, but sometimes that's sports. Peyton Manning, right? This has happened. We've seen this before.
Yeah, football is different from the NBA, but yeah, I mean, you can envision that scenario. I can't even begin to fathom LeBron changing teams again, not because it's impossible, just because my brain is not prepared to address this storyline, even though it's out there, and the Cleveland definitely is going to make a run at it and thinks they have a shot. All that stuff is true. I just can't I'm just not mentally ready for it. You mentioned Gasol. You mentioned two things. Gasol is part of the future. I don't even think Gasol is part of the future in LA. I think when his deal is up, he's gone, and maybe taking a much reduced role at a much reduced salary. And then, if you're into economics and saving money with the amnesty, canning D'Antoni and signing Phil is like a $15 million annual expense between paying D'Antoni's salary and paying Phil, 10 or 11 or whatever he's going to want. That's another thing that chips away at the amnesty savings.
You know what, though? It's probably their best move for the summer. If, they already sold all their season tickets because the deadline already happened. So they don't have to worry about people not getting tickets next year. And
their TV deal is $200 to $250 million a year.
It's insane.
Bank.
Yeah, they're making crazy money from TV, but they still have to have an interesting team. And I like what Dwight Howard's done the last few weeks. I think he looks better. I still don't think he's the overpowering guy that he was in 2009. There's no question he's different athletically. He's figured out a way to be successful and put up close to the same stats without the same athletic explosion that he had. At the same time, think about what this franchise has been over the years, right? It's always been entertaining. Going back to Jerry West, Elgin Baylor, then, the dark couple years of Kareem and the sky hook, and that was probably the most boring the team was until Magic showed up. They have an unbelievable decade with Magic. Shaq shows up. Kobe shows up. They had a 17-year run with. And you forgot how long it was until you watched last night and he wasn't there in a home game. And it just was weird to watch a Laker home game without him. Dwight isn't the most entertaining guy on the planet. You're getting Dwight. You're going to get a lot of 23, 15 rebounds. He gets fouled 20 times. He makes 10 of the free throws. I wouldn't call it showtime. So I think they're going to need a little extra. And I think I really do think the Phil Jackson thing's a possibility.
It's amazing that Phil, sitting on the bench, whistling and scowling, is somehow an iconic enough figure to up the entertainment value.
I know, it's incredible.
The team. Although the triangle is a fun basketball purist system to watch, but Dwight's going to get you some lob dunks if he's healthy, and some emphatic rejections into the crowd that he should not reject into the crowd, but will anyway. Some horrible goaltends that will be entertaining for 2 seconds and make Bill McDonald scream on play-by-play about what a great block it was until it's called a goaltend. But yeah, he's not making contested 25-footers with two hands in his face.
And we should mention it would be easy short term. And I guess when I said Gasol was part of the future, I meant next year, and then they could decide what to do after. But short term, you could pretty easily build a team around Dwight and Powell, Nash and Blake, hoping that Nash is even 50% of what he was, and that those are those are your point guards. Then the easiest thing to do in the NBA is to go out and find cheap perimeter guys who can play defense and shoot threes. They're always out there. You can get them. You can convince guys to take discounts to come to LA to for a 1-year package to kind of show off their wares. And then you keep your fingers crossed and you hope Kobe defies modern science and he can somehow be back by the All-Star break as probably a little bit of a reinvented player. I mean, I would think he would go to the basket a little less, shoot more threes, stuff like that. But, I think that's the blueprint. We should talk about Kobe, though.
We haven't been talking about Kobe?
No, I mean, I just from a big picture career standpoint, because,
this discussion.
I thought he was fantastic this year. I actually had decided to give him my first team All-NBA spot. As long as they made the playoffs. I just can't give a first team All-NBA if you don't make the playoffs. But if they make it, he's getting my spot. What he did in year 17, all the incredible shots he made. We talked about this on the podcast 2 weeks ago. Did you feel like there was a little bit of a transformation in the public's affection for him this year?
In a positive way, like more people
Yeah.
liked him, or more.
Yeah, or I would say appreciated him.
It's funny because in a way, yes, because he was more efficient on offense than he had been. He made crazy shots to keep the Lakers alive. He was throwing up 40-plus point games against Portland and the Hornets and the Raptors and whoever else. And, he's a tough, gutty, sort of traditional sports hero. And I agree with you there. But I also think this was the year where the whole Kobe is not playing hard on defense thing became a mainstream media talking point in a way that
That's
it
true.
hadn't before.
That's true.
But yeah, I mean, he's clearly, I think, both scoring efficiently and coming out of his shell a little bit in interviews and on Twitter and things like that have made him sort of enter into that beloved, aging, gritty, gutty, funny, surprisingly funny guy that, we're sort of coming to grips with his basketball mortality as he is as well. There's definitely, even the people who don't like Kobe were writing over the weekend how they're going to miss him and this and that. So I think you're onto something there.
Yeah, and I think there's no question the league is more fun when he's involved. Whether you didn't totally love the style of play he did or disagreed with decisions he made 10 years ago, it was more fun to watch him on the Lakers than it was to watch the Lakers with Andrew Godalak and some of these other guys. And, I think I remember saying before the season that I thought Kobe had entered the point of his career where he was a DH. And I said that on TV and the Laker fans got mad. But that's really what he was at this point of his career. He was a DH in baseball. He was an offense-only player who really hurt you on defense, and everybody pretended he didn't, but he really did. But everything he did offensively more than made up for the defense, and just like I thought the way he would, not just that he came through a lot down the stretch this year compared to other years, but the fearlessness that he had in those moments was really inspiring to watch. This was not a playoff team. This was not a team that should have made the playoffs. And they are now one win away from them making the playoffs. So, where did you have your big awards column going tomorrow in Grantland? Did he make the top 5 for MVP for you?
You're going to make me spoil it?
Well, I just want that's
not.
a simple question.
He did not make the top 5.
Okay.
He was in the next cut. He was close. Like you said, he spent a lot of the season as a DH. I thought the last 3 to 4 games before his injury, sadly, his defense had gotten much better, and he was clearly sort of going all out on both ends as to the degree that he can still do that to get the Lakers in the playoffs. But the DH thing is real. James Harden is a DH. Carmelo Anthony is a DH. Avery Bradley is a reverse DH. You don't think pressure and guys 94 feet impacts his shooting percentage? I mean, that he's like a reverse DH.
What would be a reverse DH? Would be like one of those slick fielding shortstops who hits 220. He's like Jose Iglesias.
Yeah, I mean, look, I haven't talked to Avery Bradley about it, but I think we can assume the other side of the coin is true too. I mean, if you're expending all your energy chasing little guys all over the court and being a pest, when that ball gets to you and you've got to create a 20-footer with 5 on the shot clock, you're going to be a little tired.
The Lakers, they won a huge game last night against the Hawks. That was Kobe reached back to 1999, 2000 with one of the dunks he had over Josh Smith. But the Lakers are not going away. And if they can stay healthy, they're going to get in. And it's just a question for me of who falls out. I don't think it's going to be Houston, which leaves Utah or Golden State. I guess Utah could potentially.
Utah is the team I'm watching, and I'm a little less bullish on the Lakers as like a sure thing playoff team than you are. But yes, it was a very exciting game last night, and Kobe, although it took every shot in the last 2 minutes of the game, he did make a couple of them that were very important.
I was more bullish after I watched the game 2 Fridays ago when the Lakers shot 3 times as many free throws as Portland. I was like, oh, okay. I forgot about this variable. The Lakers get every call variable. That could be interesting.
That was a fun. You know what was fun about that game? I didn't watch that game. That wasn't one of the games I had picked for that night.
Yeah.
Then I was reading the blog recaps, and even like the Blazers blog was, of course, going crazy about the refs. And the Lakers blogs were even saying, the refs seemed like we did get every call. NBA.com's video recap, those like 3-minute clips that did refs just not mentioned, free throws not mentioned,
Of
just
course
like,
not.
oh, look at these exciting highlights.
Antoine Jamison shot half as many free throws as the entire Portland team. I think he shot more free throws in that game than he probably did all season combined.
That would be.
So I got some breaking news that people aren't going to like. And when you said about Dirk and Cuban, it reminded me of Kobe and the Lakers.
Oh yeah, we wanted to talk about that.
I love my mom and my grandmother to death.
Okay.
I'll get in front of any bullet, any bus, any train for either one of them.
Okay.
But if it could save me $80 million, they're getting amnestied.
Really?
Yes. This is the way that the Lakers can rebuild their franchise.
Wait, is this the thing where we talked about last time in the 3-man pod where Jalen knows
Yes. Yes.
where that's like Jalen and Magic just know
You did say it was breaking news.
Yeah, all right. Keep going.
Is this a breaking opinion or breaking news?
This is a breaking opinion that is going to become more of a discussion than people really, truly realize.
If only we had someone who was a super nerd about NBA contracts here at this
I'm
table.
ready. I'm ready.
All right, and here we go. So, you're the Lakers. The timeline is 6 to 9 months for Kobe's return.
And that's really generous.
That's unrealistic.
Yeah.
In 6 months is mid-October.
Yeah.
What happens in mid-October? Training camp, preseason.
Yeah.
I would deem that Kobe Bean Bryant, in his 18th year, coming off an Achilles injury, will not be ready for preseason. So you push that between 6 and 9 months, you get between October, December, and January, right? So now, how does he show that he's ready to come back in that period? You're putting him out there for 15 minutes. He has 4 points. He looks pretty good. You got to do that every now and then. Put him out there for 25 minutes. He has 15 points. Looks pretty good. But this is your player that you're paying $30 million to, and he already said he's retiring at the end of next season. Is that really how you want him to go out? Is that really how he wants to go out? What were the Lakers when Kobe Bryant was healthy this year? What seed?
9.
An 8 seed.
Exactly. He's coming back to the same situation
With
that
no
ran
draft
him in the
picks,
ground.
no cap space.
Correct. I would be living at Kobe Bryant's house if I was a member of management. I love you, Vino. You want me to get you another glass of wine? You want to take the kids to school? Whatever you need me to do. I love you. I want you to be the ambassador of our franchise that Magic Johnson was. I'm going to put your statue up. I want you to have an ownership stake in this team. But I need you to sit out next year. I can't have you coming back rehabbing in and out of the lineup next year. I got to figure what I'm going to do with Dwight. What am I going to do with Powell? Can't bring back Nash as the starting point guard. 5 games into the year, you needed him. You had to fire a coach. 5 games late when you won 5 straight, you needed him to play. He was injured.
I have a better scenario. I see all those points. The part you left out, the insurance pays 80% of his contract if he can't play. So it'd save $24 million. Now, that wouldn't have anything to do with the amnesty. But they have first of all, they can amnesty Artest, who makes 8. They would save $24 million off the bat with that. So then they're saving another $24 million with Kobe. You add those two together, now you're at 48 minus the 8 that they'd have to actually pay Artest. So they'd save $40 million there. If they amnestied Kobe, they'd save 80, but they'd still have to pay him the 30. So it'd really be 50. So it's about the same to do it. Now, here's the catch. They trade Gasol to Houston. Now, Houston's a team with cap space, or Cleveland. They also have cap space. Let's say they trade Gasol to Houston for Chandler Parsons, who makes like $1 million next year. You offer that trade. If you're the Rockets, you kind of have to do that.
Yeah.
Because you're getting Pau Gasol on a contract year. You have his rights for the year after. You have the money to make that jump for a year. The Lakers, they cut $19 million in that trade.
But does that work salary-wise?
It works salary-wise because Houston could get under the cap to accommodate it. So the Lakers, by chopping the $19 million, they'd be saving $57 there. And then Kobe insurance would be another $24. Then they keep his rights for the after 2014, which is the big thing. If they amnesty him, it's much harder to bring him back in year 19.
He's not playing anywhere else.
You'd think. But if the way how weird
You think Kobe Bryant want to be
Here's the
rehabbing?
problem with your plan, though, is it involves Kobe Bryant not playing basketball next year.
Well, that's the thing.
And that's
if
not
they
gonna
keep
happen.
him, he's going to come back. I think he's going to come back because of the points,
because he's competitive.
And he's a weirdo.
Because he doesn't know what to do with his life. He's an overcompetitive weirdo.
Yeah.
He's already going nuts, as we saw from the Game 1 Twitter, and then he had to back out in Game 2. He's coming back. And if they amnesty him, he'll come back for a playoff team in February, March, April. And now you're risking he'll stay with that team. Couldn't you see him signing with Miami?
I wouldn't see Kobe Bryant leaving
Could
Los
you see him
Angeles
signing with
Lakers.
New York?
No. He would not play
Could
for
you see him
another
signing
team.
with the Clippers?
So
But
if he
that's
was
where-
amnestied, he would sign for another team.
But that's where the relationship and trust comes in, guys.
But
That's
who
where
is the relationship with?
that's the problem of the decision, that you don't have a Dr. Jerry Buss here, rest in peace, to make that transition to where Kobe trusts you. Remember, I said I'm at his house right now shining his shoes.
But who are you, Kupchak? Who is it?
Well, here's the X factor to the X factor. So they had this board of governors. They announced all this news, and one of the pieces of the news was after Dr. Jerry Buss's death, they have officially transferred ownership to Jeannie Buss and the Lakers. That was what the story was. I was like,
huh,
Jeannie Buss? Boy, that's weird. So we were working on Countdown with our friend Magic Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, hey, Magic, we're just hanging out in the green room. Hey, Magic, why did they say they're transferring it to Jeannie Buss? And then Magic kind of did I don't know, but it was clear that Magic knows everything.
Of course he does.
He wasn't going to say anything. But
sounds like Game of Thrones.
the whole thing made me think okay, so could Jeannie be buying out Jimmy's part?
Oh.
She gets control of the team. Phil comes back in some undefined role. Magic comes back in the inner circle because he's clearly not now. They're basically getting the band back together. Instead of amnesting Kobe, you bring him back. You figure out what to do with Powell for a year. And you just you're focused on that LeBron 2014. Everything heads toward that.
Let me throw this out there. LeBron James is not going to be a Laker in his career.
You don't think he's going to be a Laker?
No.
Gives itself the wherewithal to say, hey, look, stay with us, stick with us, because we've got a pretty good track record, and we have the flexibility to continue to get better.
Right. The Lakers and the Heat can go year by year by virtue of the markets they play in and the pedigree. I mean, look, you hear whispers now out of Lakerland that say, well, even if Dwight leaves, we're fine because we're the Lakers and we'll just get somebody else. I don't fully believe that, but that's the way they think. That's really the way they think. If you're Oklahoma City or Memphis, you can't take that approach.
Do either of you guys think LeBron is going to be in Miami in 2015?
I do not.
I do not either.
I do. But before we get to that, I need to bring this up because since Steiny Mo and Nash are BFF, I need to know how Steiny Mo feels about Simo saying that Steve Nash is washed up.
No, that's not what I said. Not what I said. I said
That's the way I read it. That's the way I read it in the press release I got.
Thank you, Steiny Mo.
And how about that? I mean, I have, you get press releases summarizing his comments now. Man.
Wow, I don't even get those press releases.
That's because nobody's watching.
Stop it. We got a huge rating. No, I said Steve Nash has gotten a free pass this year because of the soap opera that is the 2013 Lakers, and either he's still hurt or maybe he's on his way to being washed up here.
So soft-pedaled.
That's what I said. He's been terrible this year. He's been terrible. Avery Bradley.
You didn't say that. You said he's washed up.
No, or I said maybe he's washed up. I said either he's injured or maybe he's washed up. Because
okay, now I'm obviously not the I'm obviously not the most objective Steve Nash observer in the history of NBA journalism.
Mo, you need not preface that. We understand that.
But what he doesn't even have the ball right now. He's playing off guard. I mean, yeah. I was in Phoenix for his return game. In the fourth quarter, he hardly touched it. Yesterday against Miami, same thing. What would you like him to do?
Simo, what would you like him to do?
Listen, I love Steve Nash. I don't want Steve Nash to be washed up. But here's what I watched on Thursday night. Avery Bradley pestered him to the point that Steve Nash didn't want to dribble the ball over half court anymore. He was literally throwing it to other guys so they could dribble it up. I have never in my life seen Steve Nash afraid to dribble the ball up court against somebody. That's what worried me.
Well, Avery Bradley does that to Dwayne Wade and a lot of people. But
I know he does. It's just it scared me because Steve Nash. He's Steve Nash.
The way the Lakers are so twisted right now. Kobe's the quarterback. Nash is like playing off the ball, waiting for his Steve Kerr opportunities. Dwight doesn't want to pick and roll with the best pick and roll guy there is. I mean, it's absolute. It's so bizarre.
Okay, but explain this to me, Steinimo. We keep hearing about how D'Antoni is all about his system, and Gasol doesn't work in his system, and he needs guys for his system. Steve Nash, if he was playing well and if he was healthy, is the ultimate guy for his system, and yet they have relegated him to being the off guard. It doesn't make sense to me.
They're barely even running his system.
They're not running. Yeah, they're not running D'Antoni's system.
I mean, they have to play slow because they're so old, and so basically they've decided let Kobe have the ball and let Nash, because he's such a great shooter, let him spot up and work off him. But I mean, if he's going to play that role, and Steve Nash can certainly play it. I mean, we're talking about one of the best shooters ever, but he's not going to be causing the havoc he caused in Phoenix when he's getting into the paint. Now, look, he is by no means blameless here. His return was supposed to make everybody happy in Lakerland. I said that 50 times while he was out injured. It obviously hasn't happened, but you have to at least factor in he doesn't have the ball. He is not getting 50 pick and roll calls like he used to in the Phoenix days. It's just not happening.
Well, then maybe he can't get in a groove because even when he has the ball, he just seems a step slow to me. And I keep thinking like they gave up 2 first rounders for him. And I don't even think they have their lottery pick this year if they finish in the lottery.
I'm with you.
No, they don't.
They did that before they got Dwight. I'm asking watching the Lakers now, with or without Dwight, I'm asking myself, why did they even want Nash?
He certainly didn't help their defense. We could tell you that much. And, they could have gotten Jose Calderon. They could have gotten for a song last summer, right? Compared to what they paid for Nash.
They traded for Nash before D'Antoni was even a thought and before they got Dwight Howard. But looking at it now, you have to ask, how were Nash and Kobe ever going to work? I mean, if Nash doesn't have the ball, I don't know why you'd want him on your team.
I don't know either.
Nash is 39. He's not right. If you look at having a non-displaced fracture and missing all the time that he had at his age to get back to where he was and to play sort of the whirling dervish style, to me, he's morphing into what Jason Kidd was and is in Dallas and in New York. But you need to have athleticism around him to still utilize what Nash can do with his brain as much as he does with his ball handling and everything else. I mean, if Jay Kidd has to handle the ball and be a dribble penetrator, we'd be saying he's done too. But he's been able to sustain because they can kind of mix and match him with another point guard in the backcourt. And frankly, the Lakers don't have that right now. Kobe's the closest thing they have to it. And as Sonny said, to me, they're really not running. No, nobody's. I mean, they're just playing or they're running isolation set for Kobe. And to me, it's largely because they don't have the personnel to take advantage of Nash, and Nash isn't Nash right now.
Do you guys think that Dwight gets traded before the deadline? Let's start with Steinimo.
I say no. I say the Lakers because, again, they first of all, there's 2 things. As Mitch Kupchak has said, and Mitch Kupchak is one of those guys, when he makes a public pronouncement, I tend to believe it because he's such a by-the-book kind of guy. Spin is not really in his arsenal. I mean, he's come out and said, we're not trading Dwight, and we can't really make any trades with our principal guys because it's true. This season has been such a circus. They can't go through another transition of a big change. You can't. Even if Powell was healthy, you can't trade him and try to incorporate 2 or 3 new pieces now. I mean, there's just not enough time. This season is already a wash. Even if they make the playoffs, how far are they going? It's just not worth making a panic trade. But as far as Dwight, they genuinely believe still that he's staying as bad as things have gone. And privately, they'll whisper and say, you know what, we're the Lakers. If he leaves, we'll recover. We'll be fine. So I don't think there's any way we see Dwight move before the deadline.
Yeah, I would fully expect that he's not going to move, and that Dwight wants to make sure that he gets a max deal before he goes anyplace else. I don't know how long he remains a Laker, but I don't see him getting moved before the February trade deadline.
And he knows his rep cannot withstand going to the Lakers and saying, you know what, this just hasn't worked. Let's find a trade. I mean, he can't do that. He would be slaughtered if that happened.
Well, from what you guys have seen from Dwight Howard, would you give him a $100 million 5-year max deal? Because I would not. I really think he's breaking down just completely. I think his whole body is he reminds me, we've seen it before in basketball, but I think when big men lose their athleticism to some degree, it's very rare that it comes back. I remember.
Wait a minute. How old is he?
Yeah,
he's 27.
Are you kidding? Are you kidding me?
He's
been in the league for 9 years. This is his 9th year. Like remember Jermaine O'Neal. Once upon a time in Toronto.
Why are you not saying the same about LeBron James?
Because LeBron James doesn't get hurt. This guy's had a major back issue, and he's had a major shoulder issue now. And athletically, he doesn't look the same to me. And I remember Toronto traded for Jermaine O'Neal, and everybody was like, "Oh, he needs to change the scenery. He's going to be fine." Meanwhile, if you watched him in those last two, I think he was in Indiana and then maybe Miami, or no, he was in Indiana, Toronto, then Miami. But you watched him, and you're like, "Wow, this guy's just not the same athlete anymore. What happened here?" It never came back. Never came back for Larry Johnson. I'm really dubious that it's going to come back for Dwight Howard. I'm not buying it.
I can't possibly see. I mean, look, he's still recovering from the back surgery. If anything, to me, it was crazy that he started the season and was playing 30 minutes a night. Like, you look at every big man that they rushed back, every single one of them, that proved to be a mistake. Whether it was Bogut or Dwight,
Odin, everybody,
Odin,
Bill Walton, name a center who keeps getting hurt. Yeah.
Well, but for whatever reason, this idea that, especially guys that were traded for, that we need to try to expedite getting them back, it hasn't worked. I'll say this. I mean, look, I have far greater concerns that Andrew Bynum will ever be right than I do about Dwight. I think it's way too early to suggest that Dwight is breaking down physically, because he's coming back from back surgery and now he has the shoulder issue. To me, if it was feet, ankle, knees, then I'd have an issue. But upper body with Dwight, I'm not worried about that.
Here's the thing
it's mind-boggling to me. It's mind-boggling to me that Dwight has shown so much reluctance to get in pick and rolls, and like he wants post catches, and he could play with Nash and run all these pick and rolls, and I don't get it. I don't get why he just doesn't want to do that, because I think that was the thought that Nash and Dwight could replicate some of the Nash, Amari Stoudemire magic. But putting all that aside, the one area where Dwight has not gotten nearly enough of a pass from us criticizing him on the outside is he did come back very early from that back surgery, and that surgery was a big deal. I mean, the guy's been way too durable in his career for us to start writing him off. I mean, until this back surgery, he never missed any game.
I'm not writing him off. I just think. Oh, go ahead. You go, Buke, then I'll go.
The bigger problem for me with Dwight is that when he was in Orlando, his entire career, everything ran through him, and everything was built around him. And it takes, in some ways, a lesser basketball IQ when you're the centerpiece. And now he has to play off a lot of guys, and he has to figure out how to play without the ball and make an impact. And to me, that's where the great challenge is for him right now, is that he's, and it's prevalent with guys coming straight out of high school. He's never had to do that before. And to me, that's impacting his game as much as anything else.
Here are my fears in order with Dwight Howard. First of all, they told us he was going to play and he was going to recover as the season went along. Exact same guy he was 3 months ago physically. I haven't seen him get any better athletically. you think of the guy that he used to be, who was just one of the most overpowering dudes in the league, somebody who could jump multiple times for a rebound as everybody was jumping once, kind of like what somebody like Blake Griffin or Ibaka does now. He just can't do that anymore. He jumps once, everybody else is jumping twice. And in person, it really looks like he's laboring to me, and it just doesn't look like he's getting better.
Yeah, but he's got the shoulder thing too now. It's not just the back. I mean, he's got two. He's recovering from a back surgery and playing with a bad shoulder. I mean, that's a lot.
But Steiny Mo, this stuff adds up. I mean, you're a big guy. You know, Shaq hit a point where the injuries just started to wear him down. He was older than Howard. This was the mid 2000s, but at some point, it just changed for him, and he became a different type of player. I don't know if we're going to see 2009 Dwight Howard ever again. And if we don't, then why do I want to give him $110 million? And then when you look at the way he's handling himself off the court, why do I want to trust him as my franchise guy? This guy has terrible judgment, like really bad. Even yesterday, he gets mic'd up for that Lakers game. This guy should be running away from microphones. Why? What would make him think it's a good idea to be mic'd up? Just don't give interviews, Dwight Howard. Don't do anything. Stay out of the limelight for a week, and he just can't do it.
I mean, he's culpable for a lot of things, but I mean, on the health, I think we got to give him more time. I just think it's too soon and too much is going on for us to write him off on that score. You know, comments, behavior, you know, his mood, his attitude, his whole approach. I mean, you can nitpick a lot of stuff, but I'm gonna hold off. I'm gonna hold off on the health side.
One more injury question.
He's 27 years old. I mean, really, he's 27 years old. I fully, even if you give him a max contract at this point, you're only taking him through age 33. And the fact of the matter is, he's still a huge draw. I mean, again, I have far less concern about giving him a max deal and where he might go, especially since I look at him and he still has a lot to go as far as the maturity is concerned. I would expect that that's going to improve. And ultimately, I don't see him as a bad guy. I'd like him to be a more serious guy. I question just how committed he is to winning championships as much as he talks about it. But as a big with his athleticism, there are a ton of guys that I'd have far more concern about investing in than ahead of Dwight Howard.
Agree or disagree? The Lakers are going to miss the playoffs.
This is the most interesting question on the board in the NBA right now. And if you put a gun to my head right now, I still would say disagree, but I would feel really bad about it. And it's the kind of thing I feel really bad about. It's like 2 years ago when the playoffs were happening, I picked I loved the Mavs. Absolutely loved the Mavs. If you even look back at some of the stuff I wrote mid-season, I was picking the Mavs as a title contender. And then they drew the Lakers in the second round. And out of like inertia and gutlessness, I picked the Lakers when I thought that Dallas had a real chance to win and sort of wanted to be the guy that picked them. This feels like that. Like, I think it's absolutely realistic that the Lakers will miss the playoffs, and I just don't have the guts to pull the trigger right now because I respect Dwight that much and Kobe that much, and they're starting to get the pieces back. And even last night, when their announcers acted like they had won the NBA championship in beating Charlotte, you can see the beginnings of what might be a rotation coming together, but I don't feel comfortable about making this call.
I watched that whole game, and in the second quarter, the Bobcats were just killing them, and Artest was the only guy playing well for the Lakers, and he made a shot or something, and the announcer goes, "It is all about MWP right now." And I'm thinking,
they went crazy. Here's the comeback is on.
And I'm thinking, like, if it's all about MWP right now, this is not a good sign for the 2013 Lakers season because this guy is barely in a 9-man rotation on a good team. And I actually don't even think, does he play a minute for Oklahoma City?
I think he would play. Yeah, I mean, Oklahoma City has been starved for a real backup three for a couple of years now, so I think he would play that role.
12 minutes a game, maybe.
Yeah, but that's it.
That's the thing. Like, you know, we're going on our countdown show, and they make us talk about the Lakers every time. It's like, what are you going to say? Like, they're a 4-man team, and 2 of the guys aren't there. You know, and it's like, this is what happens when you build a 4-man team, and the other 8 guys are terrible. You're in trouble if 2 of the guys get hurt. I still think the key for me is just what am I getting from Dwight in March? Because I know what I'm getting right now, and he doesn't look right. And I know he's still putting up rebounding numbers, but I don't think he's the same guy. I just think athletically he's different.
Well, that's why I still have faith in them, because Dwight 2 years ago was the second best player in the league. I thought.
Yeah, but is that guy gone?
Durant has passed him regardless, but he can still be the third best player in the league, and I think we'll see something like that. I will say this though: they won last night. They were bad, start to finish. They were bad. Their perimeter defense was awful. Darius Morris has no idea where to be. Kobe is still getting back cut and beat in transition, and all the same things that were happening in Cleveland last week. Meeks is not a defensive player. And Powell, few people love Powell in his game more than I do. Love him. I think Lakers fans have been like ridiculously critical of him for years, fueled by Kobe's critical comments. And I'm hoping he was just rusty last night, because if he plays like he did last night, not only is he not going to be that helpful, but his trade value is not going to be that high, because he had no lift. He looked awkward. He looked slow. He's still a brilliant passer. He can hit a mid-range jump shot, but he did not. And again, I'm hoping it was rust at first game back after all the tendonitis stuff. But he just did. He looked old again, really old.
Yeah, and he's looked that way for 2 years. And if it wasn't for the Olympics and what he did against the best players from America in that game, when we had to double team him, basically, we couldn't stop him. If it wasn't for that, you could really make a strong case of this guy's maybe on his way to being a supporting player and not a top 20 player anymore. I just think watching Dwight, you watch somebody like Ibaka, and Ibaka's like on a pogo stick, right? All of a sudden he's in the air. You don't even see him jump. He's just all of a sudden he's 3.5 feet in the air. Dwight, you can see him jump every time. You can see him crouch. And it reminds me of what happened to Patrick Ewing on the Knicks, when Ewing, once he started crouching every time he jumped, it changed everything he did, and it changed everything about him, and it changed the impact of him as a player in the second half of his career. And that's what my fear would be with Dwight, is the pogo stick guy just gone. And if the pogo sticks guy is gone, then he can't be in the discussion anymore for best 5 players. So, I guess it's like what they're saying. Just got to wait. Is his back going to get better? I don't know. But I know what I see now, and he doesn't look like the same guy. But,
he looked better last night, but yeah, I mean, he's got to be very, very good for them to be a sure thing playoff team, because the West is good and the Lakers right now are bad. That's just the reality.
Unfortunately for him, he can't go against Byron Mullins every night. How mad are you with Dwight Howard on a scale of 1 to 10?
I'm about at a 7. I went through a range of emotions. I'm more angry at Jim Buss. I'm more angry at Mike D'Antoni. I'm not a full 10 at Dwight Howard, because part of me is happy that he left.
Yeah.
I went through a full range of emotions, and I thought, Bill, we could discuss all of them.
Well,
I think I am like a lot of Laker fans, in that I have a lot of conflicted feelings about this.
Let's talk about what you just said, though. I haven't talked to a Laker fan yet who is devastated that he left, because
right.
I think the consensus was, if we give this guy this money, we're kind of all in on the Dwight Howard thing, and I don't know if I want to be all in on the Dwight Howard thing. I haven't met anybody who's like, this is a great idea. He's going to be the face of our franchise. So, in a way, there's a weird sense of relief.
Why would you be all in on him? There's nothing in his history to suggest that you should be all in on him. I get it if you're Daryl Morey. I get it if you're another team that, it needs something, right? But if you're the Lakers and you're sitting there with Kobe and you're sitting there with Powell and you're sitting there with everything that being a Laker comes to, and the fact that it's L.A. and it's Nicholson on the sideline and it's all the stars and the glamour of Hollywood, if you're a Laker fan, there's nothing that suggests that this guy is a champion, that this guy can lead you to a championship, that this guy is willing to put a team on his back, that he is emotionally mature enough to do that. It was an unbelievably frustrating season as a Laker fan, but I forget who said this. I actually think it might have been you, but the quote I always remember about Dwight Howard is, the worst great player ever.
I don't know if I said that or not, but I'll take credit for it. He is probably one of the 2 or 3 worst great players ever.
Yeah, I mean, right? Like he's clearly a dominant player, but it's just like, wow, like he doesn't scare you the way a great player in his prime should scare you.
I thought Phil Jackson had a really interesting tweet, which is, by the way, a total rarity for Phil Jackson, because for some reason Twitter he has not been able to grasp the concept of Twitter. I would also, if I'm Phil Jackson, I'm hiring somebody else to type the tweets. A lot of misspellings for Phil Jackson.
Yeah.
For the alleged Zen master and the genius, you have to. I would think you should be able to spell sentences. But
right.
He had a great quote. He was like, Dwight's game is power and defense, and last year we didn't really see either. We saw hindered versions of the power. It wasn't the same indestructible, get out of his way, this guy's a force of nature, Dwight Howard, which we've talked about on this podcast and on the NBA show a million times. But the defense wasn't as good either. And that was the thing that, in his prime, like for instance, when he was on Orlando in 2009, you could basically have Dwight Howard could be your entire defense. And you could put Hedo Turkoglu, Rashard Lewis, Jameer Nelson, and Courtney Lee in front of him, and he could make your defense above average just by being himself. And he's not that guy anymore. Now the question is, was he recovering? Will he be that guy again? And this is what people have been arguing about for the last 9 months. I personally don't think he's going to be that guy again. It's year 10 now. People don't usually recover from that kind of wear and tear. He's played almost 750 games. He's had shoulder surgery. He's had back surgery. You watched him that whole season. Do you feel like he's going to come back to haunt the Lakers?
No, not at all. I think the move we'll talk about the state of the Lakers franchise in a second, but no, I don't think, like when I sit there as a Laker fan and I look at the West in terms of what scares me, Houston adding Dwight Howard doesn't scare me. Yeah, it doesn't. I don't think like we're going to be, in Game 7 of the Western Conference Finals, and Dwight Howard blocks 7 shots and has a 30-15 game and just blows us out of the water. I don't see that happening. I mean, that was one of the reasons why on this podcast, like literally a year ago, when they got Dwight Howard, and I was so excited. And you and I talked about it, and I think I wrote about it in the Triangle blog as well for Grantland, which is this was going to free up Kobe Bryant. Like Kobe Bryant wasn't going to have to play defense really,
right?
Or even less defense than he does, right? Is that he could freelance. He could freelance a lot because Dwight Howard was back there, so he could try to go for steals, try to go for the runouts and sort of cherry picking because Dwight's back there manning the glass, and that didn't happen at all. Defense, Bill, and here's another quote that I forget who said it, but right, defense is all effort. Right? I mean, it obviously physical skill comes into it, but it's really about effort and just wanting to play it. And I never sense that from Dwight. I never sense that he wants to do it. Like, I think.
Well, he used to be able to do it.
He used to be able to, but you just don't feel that now. And now that he's gotten paid, that he's gotten this huge contract, I mean, like.
Well, you talked about effort. Like that Spurs series, when they really needed Dwight Howard, Kobe's out.
Right.
Now it's. The lane is wide open now for Dwight Howard to just put up a 30-15 every game, dominate the Spurs. They didn't really have a big man who was nearly as overpowering as him. And Tim Duncan was out hustled him that entire series. How many times did Tim Duncan beat him down the court? Tim Duncan's 10 years older than him.
Oh, easy. Yeah, and it's played like a zillion more games with playoffs and everything like that. And yeah, he just doesn't seem to have the desire. It clicks on for a little bit. Games here at a time, quarters here in time, but it's not consistent. I mean, Kobe Bryant's season this past year was remarkable for a lot of reasons, one of which was because I felt like it was all will. I felt like it was just just like digging down and finding that extra gear. And he's like, I don't care that I'm old and I've got a zillion miles on my knees and whatever. I'm the only guy out here. Screw it. And it was just like all guts and will, and just you don't see an ounce of that from Howard.
You don't know how badly I'm holding back from about 10 sarcastic comments right now. Hold on. I'm going to hold back 2 more.
All right, fair enough.
Yeah, Dwight Howard, I don't know what's inside him, but I think after you've seen a 9-year sample size, that's a pretty big sample size. Like by the end of next season, he will have played over 800 games. It's pretty hard to change who you are as a player after 800 games. And then, Haralabas and I were arguing about this on Twitter because he thinks there's a chance Dwight could have 2 more great seasons. Now, I agree, there's a chance. But we were told last year that Dwight, with the surgery, he was going to play through it and his body was going to recover as the season went along. I didn't notice any difference in him from October to April. Did you? I felt like he was the same guy in April that he was in October.
I think he got a little bit better, but I always felt that was more like just getting a little bit more comfortable with his role, accepting the fact that this is Kobe's team and that he's stuck in an offense that hates him. I was going to say don't get me started on D'Antoni, but absolutely get me started on D'Antoni.
Well, wait, hold on, though. Before you do, hold
right.
that for 1 second. You made the key point. The reason I think he looked a little better was because it's basketball. And after 4 or 5 months, these guys knew how to play with him. And
right.
Dwight's not the easiest guy to play with. I think the team understood the ways to kind of get him involved and get him easy shots. I don't think he was better. I just think they knew how to pass to him. It's like anything else. Like if you play basketball with somebody for 6 months, you're going to realize where they like to get the ball, what they can do, what they can't do. Oh, I shouldn't give it to him on the fast break there because he'll screw it up. You realize all these little subtle things. I don't think physically he was any different. I really don't. I don't think he got 1% better physically. And if I'm a Houston fan, that's the fear because, Shaq, you think about Shaq, what you saw, and Shaq had that on-off switch after you won the title in 2000 and 2001. 02 and 03, he just showed up fat, right? But he was able to he could reach down and kind of get there. And I think the most famous Shaq game that I can remember, the most famous underrated game, 2004, game 4, I think, against the Pistons. And they needed a monster Shaq game, and he gave it to him. I bet he had like 36 points, 20 rebounds. He could reach into the tank when they really needed him and get there. I don't think Dwight can reach into the tank. I don't know what's in there.
I'm glad you brought up Shaq. I was just about to bring him up. I think that's a great comparison because I feel like he's sort of got that same kind of attitude of Shaq, and that Shaq always was sort of like, Shaq was just born, bigger and stronger and faster than, most human beings ever. And so he never had to put forth as much effort as, some other players just because he was just so physically gifted. And he would show up to camp out of shape, and he would sort of play his way into shape, and he wouldn't really look like Shaq until the second half of the season. And people talk about the fact, here's a guy as dominant as he was, and, I don't think he ever won a rebounding title in his career.
No, I don't think he ever averaged more than like 13 a game.
Right. I mean, and for somebody as, when he was dominant, I mean, he was like the dominant player of his era. But having said all that, what he did have that Dwight doesn't have, so he could sort of, for lack of a better phrase, he could half-ass it a little bit because he was Shaq, because he could overpower, because if you got the ball to him in the post, there wasn't a way you could stop him.
Well, piggyback in that point, Shaq was 7'1" and probably 350.
Right.
And he was so big and so overpowering that they officiated him differently.
Correct.
And they could have called 50 fouls a game on whoever was guarding Shaq. And it was just understood. All right, well, it's not fair that this guy's playing professional basketball, so we have to call him differently. I don't think Dwight is overpowering like that. And Dwight takes a lot of the same hits that Shaq did, but he's 6'10", and he's 250 pounds or whatever, and I think he's going to start to wear down physically. I really do.
There's no question about it, and he doesn't have the offensive game that Shaq does.
Shaq was sneaky good on the low post. He was.
He really was. He moved actually very quick for a guy his size. Like he actually dribbled well. He was actually quick on his feet for a guy that size. And I agree with it. My point is that I feel like Howard has sort of the same laissez-faire attitude that Shaq does, but he can't get to that next level. And the league has caught up somewhat, and it's a different league than when Shaq played. And so I just don't see Howard being able to get to that next gear the way you said it was Shaq. Like Shaq could turn it on at some point. Like you're not good enough to not be at a 10 at all times.
Well, here's to back that up. Dwight Howard for his career averaged 18 points a game. He's had one season where he averaged more than 21 points a game, which was in 2011, which was his peak season. He was 22.9 points a game, 14.1 rebounds a game. Now, this is somebody that...
For a bad team, by the way.
Yeah, for a bad team that really needed him and gave him a lot of shot. But he's never averaged more than 13 shots a game. 13.4 was his highest. He's a terrible free throw shooter, like just terrible, and actually getting worse. He was around 60% for most of his basically first 7 years. Last two, 49% and 49%. His offensive rebounding's not the same.
The Lakers probably lost 5 or 6 games at least purely on Dwight Howard's free throws. I remember one game early on at Houston where they had a huge lead. The Lakers had a huge lead, and the Rockets just said, we're going to just foul Dwight every single time and give him 2 shots. And he missed, something like 17 free throws or something insane, and the Rockets came back and won that game.
And he's also not a good passer. He's never averaged 2 assists a game. So you have this guy, and look, I wrote about this. My feelings about Dwight Howard and his future are well documented. I wrote like a 3,500 word column about it. I don't know if he's going to get a lot better than what we've seen. And if anything, the history of centers would say that what we saw last year is probably who he is, and, like even Shaq was like a good passer.
Yes, he was.
Shaq averaged almost 4 assists a game during his MVP season. Like he could find guys. If you double teamed him, he would find the right people.
Right.
I've never seen that from Dwight either.
Which brings up a great point, Bill, because here's the thing. So you get the ball down low to Dwight, right? You get it to him in the post. He's limited in his offensive move, so he can't really do much with the ball. And then he's also limited in his passing, so he can't even kick it out to a good 3-point shooter. Because that was the thing with Shaq, is that he could at least find Kobe when they were talking to each other, or he could find, Brian Shaw or somebody like that. He could find Ori or Rick Fox or somebody who could nail down a 3. Howard's not going to be able to do that. You know what I mean? And I don't know how you need to get Dwight Howard like he's big on the dunks. You know what I mean?
Right. And even the most success he's had as a hoop player was 2009 Orlando, who they made the finals. And I still think that was the best Celtics team of all the KG teams. And KG got hurt. The Celtics, I think, were like 35-5 or something when KG went down. So Orlando gets in the finals. They beat LeBron. Dwight was 20-15 in the playoffs, which is great. But also, it wasn't like the offense revolved around him. No. And their offense really was like Hedo Turkoglu, who, creating a lot of shots for people and all that stuff. The book on Dwight going to Houston is that, perfect team for him. He's got James Harden to create at the end of the game, so he doesn't have to worry about that. You don't have to worry about giving the ball to Dwight with 2.5 minutes left. He's going to get fouled. They'll have the floor spread with 3-point shooters, so it'll be really hard to double him. So he'll have single coverage. He'll be motivated and happy. He's got Kevin McHale. He's in a different market. Like even 6 weeks ago, I wrote this. I think this is his best chance to succeed. Do you think he will succeed there?
Sort of. I don't see the Houston Rockets winning a championship. So if we're defining success that way, then no.
But they're a contender.
Sure. Of course they are. Of course they are. I mean, the Lakers are a mess. It's the Thunder and the Clippers now, right? The Lakers are a mess. The Spurs, do they have one more run in them? I don't know. Every time you count the Spurs out, they come back again.
Because Kawhi is going to be better this year. That's the thing people forget with them. Kawhi might be an all-star next year for all we know.
Yeah, no, and it depends. Assuming Duncan doesn't hang it up. Popovich has said that he wants to retire when Duncan does, and I think as great a loss as Duncan would be, Popovich would be an even bigger one.
You don't think Popovich will try to get out of his contract after 2 years and try to coach like the Clippers or somebody?
I do not believe he would do that.
Okay.
I believe Pop hangs it up when Duncan does. I believe he's a man of his word.
Okay.
Why don't the Celtics should have hired? I'm fascinated by your. Have you? I haven't seen. Did you give your thoughts on Brad Stevens?
I have not given my thoughts on Brad Stevens. We're going to call my dad a little bit later in the podcast. Okay. I love Brad Stevens. I was delighted. I couldn't believe it. He was a great college coach.
Yeah, no question.
His teams, who was on those teams? Gordon Hayward. I can't name another Butler guy.
Mm-mm.
They made the national championship game.
He's an amazing college coach. Will it translate? Will he get young enough guys in the pros that will buy into what he's selling?
Wait, let's swing back to the Lakers for a second.
Okay, yeah.
Because here's the big story to me. And I don't feel like it was hammered home enough by people because everybody got caught up in the Dwight thing and then Kobe not following him on Twitter and all that stuff.
You're right.
This is a marquee guy who left the Lakers.
Yes.
I'm almost positive this has never happened in your lifetime, with one exception, AC Green. If you count him as a marquee superstar. But AC Green is the only Laker that I remember who said, you know what, guys, the grass is greener over here. I'm going to Phoenix. And he left.
Yeah.
People don't leave the Lakers.
No, that's the state of the franchise. That's one of the reactions I sort of had. I was embarrassed by Dwight Howard leaving. Like, I was, as a basketball fan, like, I'm not a huge fan of his, and but I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed at what the Lakers have become. You know, it starts with David Stern disallowing the Chris Paul trade, which isn't the Lakers' fault. But I think that started sort of a downward trend. When they embarrassed Phil Jackson, and that's what they did. They embarrassed him.
No question.
The way that was all handled. And I was horrified, and I was on ESPN radio, and I was trashing it left and right. It horrified me because
I'm ashamed to admit I kind of liked it.
Well, of course, as a Laker hater, as a Celtic fan, of course.
Well, I thought when they hired D'Antoni, I thought, oh, this is interesting. Now they're going to trade Powell. They'll go get like Josh Smith. They're going to be this up and down run and gun team. And it was like, no, we're not going to do anything else. We're just going to hire Mike D'Antoni, and he's going to try to coach this team of big guys. It was illogical.
Unbelievably, one of the worst basketball moves ever. I believe Mike D'Antoni coached the biggest professional sports disappointment in the history of the world last year. Name another team with that talent. You've got two surefire Hall of Famers in Kobe and Nash on that team. You've got Pau Gasol.
Well, Nash was terrible, though.
Nash was
he
terrible.
Had an awful season.
But that was one of the big arguments before, when they were so terrible at the beginning. Well, you got to wait till Nash comes back. And that was one of the big arguments was like, well, Nash is his guy, and Nash knows how to run the offense, and no one else can run the D'Antoni offense. But once Nash gets back, and like, okay.
They're very poorly coached. They
horribly coached.
I don't care how bad your role players are. When you have three players like Gasol and Howard and Kobe, you should still be better than sweating out the 8 seed in the last day.
Exactly. Even with all the injuries and everything else, they still had at least two of those four guys on the floor at all times. They should have been like the fourth or fifth seed, instead of barely making it into the playoffs.
All right, but hold that thought for a second.
Right.
So you just talked about that you were embarrassed as a Laker fan. Now, here, if I'm a Laker fan, here's what really worries me. It's not that Dwight Howard left, because you already watched that team with Dwight Howard. The next year was going to be, you don't even know when Kobe's coming back. You would have been a borderline playoff team anyway. I said this on SportsCenter, and some Laker fans got mad. They were like, oh, look at the Laker haters trying to start trouble. I'm not trying to start trouble. I honestly think they're better off just blowing this up. Stink for a year, gear around summer 2014, LeBron, all that stuff, and try to rebuild this. Like, it doesn't make any sense to go 43-39 again. You're not getting Kobe back till January, February anyway. But here's the problem that I think this is, regardless of what happens the rest of this summer and next summer, the Lakers have kind of lost what made them cool. Like, the good doctor dies. Phil Jackson's out. Magic gets phased out by Tommy Boy, the son.
Right.
I had a reader suggest that his nickname should be Tommy Boy, which I fully support. I think we should just start calling him Tommy Boy.
I don't have a problem with that, except for the fact that I actually like Chris Farley. But
well, the late Chris Farley. Chris Farley, if he was alive, would enjoy the Tommy Boy. Yeah. So you have this team now. All of the people that made the Lakers special in some way have been phased out.
Correct.
And now you have Tommy Boy running everything. And obviously the mystique has changed, because we just saw a marquee free agent look at the landscape and say, you know what, it's not that special to be a Laker. I'm going to go to Houston. And that's what would worry me if I'm a Laker fan.
Well, it is, because, I think the LeBron thing is a pipe dream. The LeBron in 2014, and I know there are other really good free agents into the loaded class, and I don't disagree with your assessment. Like, let's just stink for a year and hope to reload and hope to
bottom out.
Yeah. But, that's not the Laker way. And as a longtime Laker fan and as a huge Kobe fan, I hate to see the end of Kobe's career like this. I don't want to see Kobe like Jordan on some crappy Wizards team. You know what I mean? Like, dogging it out. I don't want to see that. Kobe's got a very, very small window to try to get his sixth ring, and I would love to see that, obviously. And it was disappointing to, so if that's the case, then if Kobe takes the whole year off and you bottom out, but Kobe's not going to do that. That's just not how he's built. It's not how he's wired.
Especially when he's got scoring records he wants to get to.
Right.
He's going to come back as soon as he possibly can.
Absolutely.
And he's going to score 30 points a game immediately.
Right. So it's just, I don't see that scenario happening. So knowing that that's not going to happen, what I really wanted to happen, this is what didn't happen. What I really wanted to happen, Bill, was I wanted Dwight Howard to basically say, either through the media or through a middleman or what, basically say like, look, I ain't staying if D'Antoni's here. And I wanted the Lakers to fire D'Antoni, and then I wanted Dwight to say, you know what, I'm still going to Houston. That's what I really wanted to have happen.
Yeah, so you get both of them.
I get rid of both of them. Because
that's great.
Because D'Antoni refused to. Like I was arguing with a good friend of mine who's a Lakers fan, and we were going back and forth. And he's a D'Antoni defender, and he was just saying like, look at the record. After everyone got healthy and towards the second half, and they were the fifth best record or over the second half, whatever the stat is. And I said, all I know is he ran Kobe into the ground, and I know I can't prove that he caused Kobe's injury, but you can't prove that he didn't. And he totally.
Well, you watched that game, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
People think I'm crazy when I say this, but I was watching that game.
Yes.
Thinking, oh my God, Kobe. It was like watching a car where the RPMs go to like 8, and you're like, oh, this is bad. They're pushing him too far. Like almost got hurt two other times in that game, where it was like each time he went down, you're like, oh, that was it. He got hurt. And he was pushing it too far. It was insane. It was insane what they did to him.
There's no question about it. Our mutual friend Lewis and I were going back and forth during that exact game, watching that. He totally messed with Powell's head.
Totally. He screwed that up in December.
Completely screwed that up. It, made Powell like a shell. Here's one of the best centers in the NBA, and you reduced him to a role player, like shooting 20-foot jumpers. Like what? Taking threes? Like what are you doing? Like,
here's what I would do.
They played no defense. He refused to sort of change the style of play. Completely screwed up the rotations. Like. Just the whole thing is a mess, and the fact that they're like, yeah, you know what, that thing that we had last year, we want more of that. I guess they are tanking.
Here's what I would do. I would trade Pau Gasol to Cleveland for Anderson Varejao, who makes $10 million less, and Sergei Karasev, the rookie they drafted, number 19. And I would just bottom out, because Varejao gets hurt every year. He'll play 10 games, it'll get hurt. Just tell Kobe, look, when you come back, we're going to be terrible. You can shoot 40 times a game. Just shoot it how about this? Every time we have the ball, you can shoot. Remember the Toronto 81-point game? That'll be the second half of the season. That's going to be our offense. You're just going to shoot every single time.
And like what was that high school? What's that high school or that junior college?
Or the Grinnell College. Yeah,
Grinnell. Right, exactly.
That's your offense. Just Kobe. Let's see if you can win the scoring title playing 40 games. You somehow have the most total points.
Right.
And just go 20 and 62. Like there's nothing wrong with that. You're not winning the title next year.
Oh, no doubt. It's just that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen.
I know,
and they have too many. They have too many season ticket holders and too many.
All those people paid.
Yeah.
And Laker fans are smart. I mean, the one thing I know, I give Laker fans a lot of shit, but Laker fans are smart. Like they'll get it. If you be like, look, we're going to bottom out. We want to get LeBron next summer. We want to get an asset. This is the best draft in 7 years. We want to get a top 5 pick, and this is what we're doing. You guys will understand. We have a history of success here. And then in a year, you try to get a real coach. You try to get LeBron, the whole thing. You have to go, right? It's 1:00.
Yeah.
All right. You have to go. We'll continue this later in the summer. We should mention your book's coming out next week, July 16th. It's called Fantasy Life. I guess it's a semi-autobiography, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's a little bit of my story, but it's mostly like the craziest, funniest stories, from fantasy sports. Like I got a guy that had to get a tattoo. Like he lost his fantasy league. And so he had to get a tattoo chosen by the winner. Like, so there's a guy walking around Nebraska right now with a Justin Bieber tattoo on his leg.
Wow.
So it's a bunch of stories like that. It's all the craziest, funniest stories I have. Cousin Sal gave me a couple stories. I got one story from you. So it's like, it's a lot of fun stuff. It's not a how to win at fantasy sports. It's a
easy summer reading.
Correct.
All right, so it comes out a week from Tuesday. We will look out for that. Good luck dealing with this follow the Lakers thing. Maybe this leads with Jimmy Buss. Like Jeannie takes over, Phil comes back, Magic gets involved again. Like maybe the band gets back together. Maybe this is your outcome here.
That's my dream. That's what needs to save the franchise. You have to get Jeannie and Phil back.
We'll have you on later in the summer because football's coming up.
Cool.
All right. Good luck with the book.
Thanks, Bill.
What is the general reaction of people? You always talk to people in the league. You're great at networking. What was the general reaction on this question? Can Dwight Howard succeed and reach his maximum potential on the Houston Rockets?
I think people are confident about that, and I don't know. I think there's still some question about how close his max potential is to that, 2011, 2012 Dwight. And after the 2011 season, I thought he was the second best player in the league.
I agree.
I think there seems to be some optimism that he can get to 90, 95% of that he's a better, more energetic player than he showed for the most part last season. And that if he just gets there, this is a huge win for Houston. I mean, nobody doesn't think this is a huge win for Houston. Everyone loves it. Everyone is scared of Houston. People are pretty much optimistic.
Yeah, I mean, obviously my feelings are on paper. I think Dwight is a scary proposition as a free agent for a lot of reasons and for a lot of teams. Houston is the best chance for him. I don't know if he'll ever get back to 2010, 2011 Dwight, who was 23 and 15 a game and just overpowering at times. And it could also, the defense was what slipped the most from him last year. He was a one-man defensive shutdown guy for multiple years in Orlando and just wasn't that guy anymore in LA for whatever reason. I'm cautiously optimistic he'll be really good in Houston. Could he get, for at least the first 2 years of this contract, could he get to 19 and 14 a game? That's more than worth $20 million a year, right? You take that 19, 14 and B plus defense.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I'm even less concerned with the numbers than, he's going to get numbers. He got numbers last year. I'm less concerned with that than I need to see the defense get back to close to where it was in Orlando, because for the first 40, 45 games last year, he was sort of a neutral presence defensively. He's still big. He can still jump okay, but he was reaching, he was lurching, he was slow. He didn't want to come out of the paint. And some of that is scheme stuff. Some of that is him. He looked better as the year went on, but you just never got the sense of that you did in Orlando, where he took pride in, I am single-handedly elevating this team into the top 5 in defense, and I'm going to be a force from the three-point arc to the rim on every single possession because that's what Stan demands that I do. That Dwight, even if he goes for 16 and 12, is an absolute max player, no-brainer.
I agree. I'm not sure how many that Dwight. I'm not sure on how many teams he would have been somebody that you could actually win the title with. But I think on this Houston team, just because they already have Harden in place, they have Parsons, they have some good shooters already. They have a front office who has a track record of being able to fill in the blanks and get these role players left and right just consistently. And that's something he's never really, think about his last 2 GMs, Otis Smith and the debacle last year with Jimmy Buss and the Lakers. So he's never really had somebody making the right moves on his behalf. And let's be honest, the pressure part, I think, is a real thing. I just think the Lakers having that spotlight on him and dealing with Kobe day after day after day and dealing with a coach he didn't like, I think it put him into a little bit of a funk. So there's a chance there will be a rejuvenated Dwight last year. I just wonder physically, and this is the great unknown, but 700, I think he's played 735 games, something like that. There's been real wear and tear. He's had surgeries. I just wonder if the Dwight that we saw in 2011, if it's even capable of coming back. What would you give for
back
odds?
Back injuries are notoriously horrible, but go ahead.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe he shouldn't have played last year. It was always this thing we heard, he's going to recover as the year went along. It never totally made sense. How is playing 40 minutes a night on a basketball court can help you recover. So I don't know. But do you feel like Houston's one of the top 5 contenders now, right? Would you put them in the top 5?
I mean, if they're not there, they're right on the edge of that. I mean, it's Miami, and then you probably have to go to the Western Conference for the next 3 or 4 teams. And depending on who you talk to, Houston is either one of the 2 favorites in the Western Conference, or they're sort of just, they're in the top 5. They might be 3 through 5. They might be 1 or 2 if Dwight is 2011 Dwight again. So, I mean, look, the West is going to be insanely competitive, and people are forgetting, by the way, how good Oklahoma City is. I mean, people are acting like Oklahoma City's in trouble. They lost Kevin Martin. The Harden trade didn't work out. And it's like, that was the best team in the NBA by point differential last season. And I think they can replace a lot of what Kevin Martin does on the cheap. So they're going to get a shooter in the next few days, and they're going to go into next season as like a 60-win team. People are like writing them off somehow. It's very strange to me.
Yeah, I wouldn't write them off, but man, that trade was you basically downgraded a year from Harden to Kevin Martin, and then Kevin Martin leaves, and then on top of it, the Toronto pick doesn't totally work out. You get the 12th pick in an 11-player draft, and then Jeremy Lamb couldn't even play for them last year. Now you're putting a lot of pressure on him. He actually has to come in and play unless, it's interesting. I'm sure you're going to be writing about free agency a ton this week. There was like a run on shooters. I was surprised. Like, I thought the history of free agency is usually like end of July, there's going to be 3 or 4 swingman shooters left who fall through the cracks. And then it's like people just kind of get discounts and it's awesome. This year, it seemed like everybody felt like they had to get one. And suddenly, like, I'm looking at the Kevin Pelton released the thing today about like the best 20 free agents left. The only shooter I see on the list is Gary Neal. And that's it out of the top 20, according to Kevin Pelton. So let's say they add Gary Neal. Is that a team that can win the title?
Gary Neal is not the kind of guy I would want, and I don't think he's the kind of guy they want. I think they'd like a bigger wing kind of player, which is why I'm surprised one of these Delfino, Darrell Wright kind of guys hasn't fallen to them yet. And there's still a few like that out there. But yeah, I mean, look, if you have Durant and Westbrook and solid defense, and they were a top 5 defense last year, there's no reason they shouldn't be a top 5 defense this year. That's one thing that Scott Brooks has done well, is get that team to play in a smart way on that. And they're a title contender. I mean, look, they're not. I think Houston's emergence and the Clippers, I think, are going to be better next year. I think they lose their status as sort of de facto Western Conference favorite, but it's not as if I'm taking any of those teams over Oklahoma City in a 7-game series, just sort of, without thinking about it. They're going to be really, really good. But yeah, the Harden deal didn't work out, and that Perkins contract is a disaster. And you have Thunder fans who will tell you, well, even if we amnestied Perkins, we can't get under the cap and blah, blah, blah. But if you amnestied Perkins, you'd at least have the mid-level exception without going into the tax. And if you have the mid-level exception, you're getting one of these guys. You're getting Korver, or you're getting somebody like that who wants to chase a ring, and they're like striking out left and right. I mean, they're going to get someone, but they're like choices 1 through 9 are off the board for them.
Yeah, I mean, I was even thinking like, maybe Randy Foye. And now he's going. Like, it was really like probably their top 12 choices that you could have fit in of guys who could at least play the 2 guard and hit some threes. All those guys are gone. They're at $64 million next year, and that's before even factoring in Steven Adams, whatever his rookie contract's going to be, and filling out the roster with minimum guys. So they'll probably end up being at about 60. Like high 60s, maybe even like 69.5, something like that, which is dangerously close to the tax. I agree with you. I would have amnestied Perkins. I just thought that was the play because they had to get a mid-level guy out of this free agency. And, a lot of teams had cap space. And there were also, like, Portland kind of swooped in on Darrell Wright. I didn't feel like he didn't make as much money as I thought he was going to make. Kyle Korver made more. Kevin Martin made more, obviously. Chase Buninger, all these guys were a little bit overpaid. Darrell Wright was the one guy who went for less than I thought he would. I don't understand the Perkins thing. It's almost like they make the Harden trade partly because they just were afraid to amnesty Perkins, and now they're kind of on that hill with Perkins. They're stuck there. It's like, now he's our guy. And he's just not good at basketball. He used to be. But
yeah, he's not good. I think he has value as a locker room guy for them, and he's still an okay defender in the right games and in the right situations, and I think actually underrated now defensively because of how in vogue it is to hate him. But I mean, he's not anywhere near worth his contract, and he's making almost $9 million next year. I mean, that's a joke. He's not anywhere close to that kind of player.
8.5 and then 9.1, and the irony is like, the price for centers who are actually better than him probably. Like I would rather have Robin Lopez than Kendrick Perkins. Robin Lopez was basically put on a pamphlet and sent to 29 teams when New Orleans was trying to create cap space for Tyreek Evans. Portland bit. They got Robin Lopez for 2 years, $10 million, which I think is a steal because at least he's going to be able to play 25 minutes a game and not kill you. Zaza Pachulia, in one of the worst signings of the summer, went to Milwaukee for 3 years, $16 million. I think
I'm not going to. By the way, I'm not going to hate on Zaza, man, because I'm going to have to face that guy at some point in the locker room, and he'll. That's not. He's a tough dude. I'm not. You can hate on Zaza. I'm going to leave that to you.
I do not hate on Zaza. I like Zaza. I think he's an effective backup center. I'm just saying, I don't know where you're going if you're paying him $5 million a year. We have a pretty established track record of don't overpay fringe role guys, right? Like it seems like it's the one thing I thought by 2013 we had figured out. Don't pay multiple years and more than like 3 or 4 million max for somebody who's your 10th man.
Well, he's better than a 10th man. I mean, what did he made last year in the 4s? So this isn't a huge raise for him, I don't think.
He made 5 last year.
He's a solid all-around big man. I mean, you got to pay for that. But the general thing that we're talking about is the fact that he and Robin Lopez combined make about what Perkins makes is just indicative of how bad that contract is. I mean, Splitter got basically the same contract level as Perkins, and Splitter, his performance in the finals aside, can like catch the ball and move without committing a traveling violation every single time he gets it. I mean, he's a good two-way player, and that's what you pay for a good two-way player. And Perkins is like an okay one-way player and like the worst player in the league at the other side of the floor.
The single worst offensive player in the league. You're playing 4 on 5 with him.
You're playing, it's 3.5 on 5. On a bad day, that guy can't even post up without traveling. And then he gets called for traveling and he scowls at the refs like, how dare you notice that I changed pivot feet 3 times? It's not a good scene.
Well, explain this to me about the NBA. So I'm Milwaukee. I have no chance of winning the title next year, right? I have some cap space. My choices are I could pay $5 million a year for the next 3 years for Zaza Pachulia, who is not going to change my destiny at all either way. Or I could just grab Greg Steemsma and pay him $1.1 million a year, and he probably gives me 83% of what Zaza gives me. Why wouldn't I just pay the minimum for Greg Steemsma?
That's actually a fair question because the Wolves
I'm not going anywhere anyway.
The Wolves have waived or announced they're going to waive Steemsma, so he's going to be available. He might make more than 1.1, but he's not going to make more than like 2.5, and he might only make the minimum. And that's a fair question. I mean, look, Steemsma can't stay on the floor because he fouls every 2 minutes that he's in the game, and he doesn't rebound, especially offensively, like Zaza, or play defense quite as well as Zaza. But he can give you a lot of stuff for a fraction of the price, and that's fair. I mean, I think Milwaukee is one of the mystery teams of the offseason in terms of no one can figure out quite what they're doing other than signing like okay players at okay contracts. And a lot of that, I think, and I write about that in a post that's going up today, a lot of that is ownership. And that's the variable that a lot of fans and even a lot of media, it's tough to get to, but that's an ownership group that has said over and over again, we are not tanking. And we are going to be okay chasing the 8th seed and the 7th seed. And like, if your owner says that, that's what you do. Just like the Pelicans, Tom Benson wants to win next year. He doesn't want to tank again. He wants to win. And so there they go, overpaying Tyreek Evans and rolling the dice a little bit.
Oh, overpaying is an understatement. Milwaukee, the last 3 years, I think they've given somewhere between like $4.5 and $7.5 million a year to maybe 7 role players. It's a bad strategy. It's probably the dumbest thing you could do as an NBA team. And what's funny is they tried to get out of multiple deals that they made, like Corey Maggette with somebody that within a year they're trying to get out of that. Drew Gooden has been an amnesty candidate the entire time he's been there.
I'm hoping
John
he makes
Salmons,
it. I'm hoping he survives. That would be the greatest non-amnesty in NBA history if he survives.
2 more years of Drew Gooden at $6.7 million a year. Luke Mbah Moute for $4.5 million. That seems a little pricey, but on down the line, like we have years and years and years of evidence that the worst thing you could do in the NBA is overpay role players. It's the quickest way to just get in trouble. And I don't understand.
What's if your owner tells you we want to win 40 games every year because the fans won't care otherwise? What else are you supposed to do? Just defy him and say we're going to tank, or we're going to play for the draft, or try and convince him that that's the right way to go?
I would defy him by saying, no, we're going to get our cap space. We're going to make it run at so-and-so. Like, why couldn't they have given $56 million to Josh Smith? I think Josh Smith's underrated.
They absolutely could have. They came within like 2 minutes of trading for him at the deadline.
I would just rather put my money toward people like that, or Andre Iguodala, or whatever. Overpay somebody who's at least actually a good basketball player.
That's fair, and the need for them on the wing is huge. I'm surprised they weren't one of the rumored. Well, they were a rumored Iguodala team, but it never got to the point where there was actually serious noise about them. But he would have been great there. But is he going there? I mean, I think a lot of teams got the message, including the Pelicans, that Iguodala is not interested in going to places X, Y, and Z. And if you get that vibe, then, you move on to the next guy. Smith would have been interesting for them. And I agree with you. People love to slam Smith, and everyone's slamming the Pistons today. And, Josh Smith is a really good player. And it's not like Monroe and Drummond are playing 80 minutes a night combined. I mean, this idea that Josh Smith becomes full-time small forward now is not really real. He's going to play plenty of power forward, and we'll see how it works there. They're an interesting team. I don't quite know where they're headed, but I'm curious to see. I
really like the Josh Smith signing, and Drummond's a guy who is going to play 20 minutes a game next year. Anybody who thinks he's ready to be a 40-minute a game guy didn't watch him last year. I think he's really talented, but that is a project. And if anything, Josh Smith takes a lot of pressure off him now because they're not going to have to play him 35 minutes a game. Josh Smith, year after year, 17, 18 points a night, 9 rebounds a night, 4 assists, a couple blocks, has always been somewhere between like maybe the 6th and the 9th best forward in basketball. His teams have always won. They've always made the playoffs. He's always been the second or first best player on teams that have won between 45 and 48 games. They've won playoff series. And everybody just focuses on the fact that sometimes he takes terrible jump shots. Well, congratulations. So do about 20 other players in the league. I think, I wrote that column a year ago about Russell Westbrook, how he was a 90% guy, and people just focus on the 10% of annoying things about his game, and they ignore the 90%. I think Josh Smith's another example of that. A lot of what Josh Smith brings to the table is really good. Now, if you're going to talk, is he a bad guy? I don't know. Is he, he definitely had some clashes with coaches. He's moody. There's no question, like he's got some personal baggage. I like the fit with him in Detroit. I like what they're putting together with that team. I think, it took 100 years, but they have pieces I like. I like Josh Smith. I like Monroe. I like Drummond. I like Brandon Knight. That team's, could they be a 7 or 8 seed? Yeah, possibly. They might have one more move to make, but I'm glad you agree with me on Josh Smith. I don't know why. Why do you think he gets picked apart like this?
Because he's one of those guys who's so obviously talented in a physical and even a mental sense. He's so athletic and so good, and his strengths are so obvious to everybody, including him probably, that when he goes outside of those strengths in a way that hurts his team, it's almost more, it's highlighted even more because of how blatant it is. And some of those decisions are really dumb. But yeah, look, I've said this before. If you have a guy who's big and gives you B+ level ball at both ends of the floor, and he can get higher than that on the right night on both ends of the floor, like that's insanely valuable. And, he's at the very least for Detroit, he's an asset. And I agree with you. I do think it was inevitable that the combination of him and Joe Dumars was like immediately going to be panned. There was going to be no like 5-second Twitter delay before everyone started mocking that deal. But the idea that, and it became overblown immediately, like, oh, he has to play small forward now all the time and be oh, maybe the Pistons are shopping Monroe to the Celtics for X, Y, and Z for Rondo, or shopping Monroe around the league because now they have Smith. I think both of those are overblown. Detroit, I don't think, is in a rush to suddenly rejigger their entire big man rotation. I think they like the asset. He's a good player. They're going to see what happens.
I like Josh Smith. I'm happy to be in the minority on this. I voted for him for third team All NBA 2 years ago. Last year was between him and Paul Pierce for that last spot on my ballot anyway, for the sixth forward. So they got somewhere between the sixth and ninth best forward in the league. That's not a bad thing. You brought up the Boston thing. Listen, I don't have inside information on this one. If I did, I would admit it. I think there's a fit here with Boston and Detroit. And you look at the history that Rondo's had with Josh Smith going back to Oak Hill, what the Celtics are trying to do. Just, they're obviously trying to blow it up without admitting it. Detroit has two big expiring contracts, Rodney Stuckey and Charlie Villanueva, for I think $17 million combined, which means if I'm the Celtics and I'm trading Rondo, I need to get an asset back that's a potential blue chipper, and I need to dump the Gerald Wallace contract, right? That has to be in any trade I do. So if you just look at this on paper, Stuckey and Villanueva and Andre Drummond and a future draft pick for Rondo and Gerald Wallace.
I think you should already stop. I don't think they're trading Andre Drummond under almost any circumstances. But I agree with you. The bones of an offer are there.
You don't think they would trade Andre Drummond to get Rondo?
With a ACL injury and the Pistons wanting to make the playoffs this year and Drummond being, looking like the kind of beast defensive center that you really, really need if you want to win a championship and you don't have LeBron, I just don't. They probably like Rondo. I've heard they'd like Rondo. I don't know that I would make that trade if I were them, and I think I just don't see them moving Drummond. Well, I don't see it.
We should mention that this trade could not happen until December because the Celtics could not put Gerald Wallace in a deal that involves multiple players until December. Realistically, that's when Rondo would be traded, right? But they can't trade him now because people would want to see him be healthy. If the Celtics played this smart, and it seems like they're playing everything smart, they'll wait as long as possible to bring Rondo back. They'll stink for the first 2 months. Rondo comes back, you showcase him for 5 or 6 games, and then he's on the table. And whoever wants to make the best Rondo deal, step up. So here's Rondo, just to remind you. I know you know he's good. Rondo in the 2012 playoffs. 42.6 minutes a game, 19 playoff games, 17.3 points, 11.9 assists, 6.7 rebounds, and 2.4 steals, shot 47%. His PER was 22.0. And they came within one win of making the finals. He was by far the best player on the team. You have to give up something to get something. I know Andre Drummond's got a lot of promise, but if I'm Detroit and I have a chance to build around Greg Monroe, Josh Smith, and Rajon Rondo, I'm doing it.
God, Rondo and Smith make me nervous just for the sheer lack of shooting that's going to be on the floor at all times. But
some bricks,
and the Celtics have, the Celtics under Rondo have been a bad offensive team. Now there are a lot of circumstances that go into that. It's not just Rondo, but I do think his lack of shooting has really hurt them. But as you say, in the playoffs, he's been a monster for the most part. And look, if there's any deal in which the Celtics can get Drummond for Rondo, they have to think really, really hard about it. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if they would pull the trigger immediately and be high-fiving on the phone if that happened.
Yeah, I think the other possible destination for Rondo, again, no inside information, just using logic, Sacramento. Sacramento's got, and I don't think they'd be able to get Boogie Cousins because I think Sacramento is really making a commitment to Cousins, and I think they realize, what a dysfunctional organization that was and how much of that might have contributed to some of the weird stuff he did. I think they know how talented he is. Everybody loves that owner, the Vivek. People just seem
everyone likes him.
Everybody likes him. The consensus is this guy knows what he's doing. Great asset for the league. I've never talked to the guy. I don't have any connections to the Kings. Just this is the buzz that's going around the league. Like the Kings are finally in good shape after 10 years of being run by the Village Idiots. And I think they understand they need to get a second guy. You know, they have a bunch of interesting pieces, but Cousins is really their only all-star caliber guy. You're not a Cousins fan. But you would agree that he has the potential.
He's young and he's been in a terrible situation his whole career. And Rondo would cold clock that dude the first possession he loafed
right.
to complain to officials about a foul he thinks happened and, played horrible defense.
And that's a team that has some assets, and they have Simmons is their expiring contract. So if Boston's goal was to dump Gerald Wallace in any deal they make for Rondo, they would have a chance to do that with some of the Sacramento pieces. That's the only other team. I look around the Celtics go either you get a blue chipper back for Rondo that you can build around, or you get a lot of picks and you try to dump that Gerald Wallace contract, which is just the albatrosses. Oh, we didn't even talk about that trade. Like you, I've heard the same thing. I didn't like the trade when it happened, and then you talk to people around the league, and the general consensus was it's amazing they got all that stuff back for Garnett and Pierce. You heard the same, right?
Oh, yeah. It's funny. It's almost been universal that Boston that's a hard win-loss trade because the priorities are just so different. But people are almost universally amazed that Boston got all those unprotected picks for a guy they were going to waive in 3 days. And for a 37-year-old in KG with a gazillion minutes under his belt. But, I have heard some people say the sort of giddy reaction to Boston side of that trade is symptomatic of the league is a little bit obsessed with draft picks right now. And this idea that the great unknown is better than, the known. And they look at those Brooklyn picks and they say, well, look, it's clear that Prokhorov is going to spend and flip his bad expiring for your slightly worse long-term contract to get an okay player. And if he keeps doing that, the Nets might win 45 games every single season, even after KG and Pierce are out of the league. And maybe those picks don't turn out to be so good. But yeah, people are amazed that Boston wrenched all those picks away. And even if they never use them, they're going to be those sort of assets that make other GMs drool when Danny tries to, construct the next KG style trade, which you can bet that they've kicked around about 10 versions of that inside the front office.
Yeah, the key is the fact that the picks are trade assets. And that's the part people forget. I've had some friends of mine and people like, what do we need all those picks for? Are they you're just going to keep drafting young guys? And it's like, no, those picks are, you're stashing them. And then eventually the hope is that you make another KG style deal in 2 years when you build the right team around whoever you're building around. The important part to remember about those picks, because the 2014 pick isn't going to be great because Atlanta has the right to step in and grab the better pick, and they're going to get the second best pick out of between Atlanta and Brooklyn. So you're not getting in the top 5 in the lottery with that pick. But they have the 2016 and 2018 unprotecteds. They also have the right to swap in 2017, which when we were reacting to this on the draft when it happened, we didn't know that part. That's huge. So here's a 3-year window where you have unprotected chances with the Nets pick, and you look at their 2016 roster, $25 million for Joe Johnson, $21 for Darren Williams, and $17 for Brook Lopez, right? So they're at the cap right there.
Yep.
Whatever else they do, they're already at the cap. KG and Pierce has 1 year left. KG has 2 years. They have to pay KG in 2015. KG has the no trade clause, so they won't be able to flip him for another asset. So, you look at that 2016 Nets roster, that's the season the Celtics have a chance to get lucky because they're going to have no way to really improve that roster. All they need is Joe Johnson to look old or Darren Williams to get hurt or whatever. And I think that's the prime pick, 2016, because we know the Russian in 2017 and 18 is going to buy whoever. I don't know. I've kind of talked myself. Now I'm a gigantic homer. I knew I was going to talk myself into the trade within 5 days. Is it worth taking Gerald Wallace's terrible, awful, horrendous contract of $30 billion for the next 3 years to get all those picks?
I don't think it's a matter of worth it. I think that just is what they had to do. I don't think they had a choice, and they were operating under a very short timetable, especially with Pierce. And they pulled the trigger on a move that they thought was the best move for the team, and I think it was the right move for them. And if Gerald Wallace's contract is the cost, then that stinks. I do think they'll be able to move. And again, they moved Jason Terry too, which is sort of cuts into that pain of the Gerald Wallace contract a little bit. And I think they'll be able to move if they want one of those Bass and Lee contracts in the near future. So they'll be able to eat away at that bill a little bit. But yeah, that's a terrible contract, and they'll try like hell to move it. And maybe they'll find a taker somewhere down the line.
And the other part with this trade that I don't think people factor in enough, you make this trade, you're hurting next year's team, which helps your own pick. And it's weird to factor that into a trade. But it's like they make this trade, they get all these picks, but on top of that, they have now also improved their own draft pick from 20th in the best draft in 7 years and possibly in 11 years. They've improved their pick from 20th now to 4th or 5th, potentially. Especially if they play this Rondo thing right. Yeah, if they wait on the Rondo thing, all this stuff. What's interesting is, kudos to Tom Ziller at SB Nation. I thought he wrote a smart column about the different, like people are already talking about Tankapalooza and stuff like that. And it's a little bit erroneous. Like what teams are doing right now, they're not tanking. They're rebuilding, to steal Tom Ziller's point. The tanking comes in March and April when you're doing really, really shady stuff like what the Warriors did when they were trying to keep their Harrison Barnes pick, right? When guys are getting surgeries that don't totally need them yet and people are sitting out games and you don't even know what their injuries are. That's tanking. That rebuilding is a totally different thing. Utah isn't tanking by that crazy trade they made to take all those terrible Golden State salaries. They are just making a decision to intentionally make the team less competitive. The tanking is going to come later. But when you think about the teams that have decided to willfully make their teams less competitive, it's not that long of a list this summer. Like even like the Hawks are trying to get better. Really, it seems like Boston and Utah. Can you think of any other teams that have willfully tried to make their teams worse?
You're stealing one of my points in today's free agency column that the Tankapalooza has been overblown.
I'm sorry.
No. I mean, look, let's talk about it. I mean, you go through. I think Orlando to me is a team that could have done some stuff and decided we're just going to keep what we have and slow build. They could have taken some steps with Harrington and Haydu to get cap room and been aggressive players for some people, and they just decided, slow burn is the way to go. And
I agree.
Beyond that,
it's a good strategy.
Phoenix is going to be bad no matter what. So I don't think Bledsoe really changes their win total for this season all that much. And, everyone else is, and Philly is the other one that clearly is tanking this season.
So those are basically our Fab Five right now. Philly, Orlando, who was the other team?
Utah, Boston, Phoenix.
And Phoenix. Those are the Fab Five.
And there are some other, like Sacramento could be really bad. Charlotte, I think, is all the Al Jefferson deal with Charlotte is a great win-win to me because he helps them, but he helps them so little that they might still be one of the 5 worst teams in the NBA. So he helps their perception without hurting their draft odds all that much. So they could also be really bad.
You know what's funny? Else? You and I agree on like 99% of the players in the league, but we have like 5 where we differ on. And I think Al Jefferson's one of the 5. I like Al Jefferson. He has to be double teamed.
I agree. I mean, look, I don't not like Al Jefferson. I'd happily pay Al Jefferson $8 million a year, especially if my other big man was a really, really good defensive player. Like if I had Tyson Chandler or Serge Ibaka.
What about Bismack Biyombo?
Bismack Biyombo is in the same boat as like Festus Ezeli. And who else were we talking about before? Someone else we were already talking about. He needs to go to like catching the ball 101 before we can talk about him as an impactful defensive player. But he should be really good, but he needs to be able to catch the ball.
I actually like the Al Jefferson signing because for what they're trying to build, you just can't be awful year after year after year. I actually think bad habits and just all kinds of bad stuff can happen if you lose too many years in a row. I think we just saw it with Minnesota. And they also needed to get above that stupid salary cap floor. What I thought was interesting was they had to amnesty Tyrus Thomas to do it. So now, for what they paid for Al Jefferson, we both agree he's worth, if they had given him $29 million for 3 years, you would have been fine with that, right?
It makes me a little uneasy, but I would be ultimately fine. Yes.
Okay. So they gave him 41 for 3 years.
Right.
But you're
which is insane. Anyone who watched the Jazz over the last 2 years and thinks that Jefferson is worth that much more than Millsap is crazy.
Well, I agree with that. But if you're Charlotte, you can't get anybody. You have, now that Sacramento has sold to new owners, you have the most dysfunctional franchise in the NBA. You are the team that all the agents and all the other players look at and they say, well, it could be worse. I could play for Charlotte. Like you were the nadir of the NBA. So how are you going to get anybody? You have to overpay. You got to pay 40% above the sticker price to get anybody. So that would be my defense. It's weirdly I'm defending them and insulting them at the same time.
I think that that's the correct defense. I mean, the defense for that deal is Charlotte has once they vaporized Tyrus Thomas's contract, Jefferson is the only non-rookie contract on the books. So they can sign him to this amount and still have max cap room every summer in perpetuity. It doesn't hurt their cap space at all.
Yep.
And you can't. So you have cap space, right? You want free agents. That's the whole point of this. That's the whole point of no longer trying to get one of the top 3 picks in the draft. You want free agents to sign there. You can't get them if you're a complete embarrassment. You can get them. You might be able to get them if you're like run of the mill bad. Like if you win 30 games and you have all these young players on the rise and there's some Michael Jordan buzz, but you can't get them if you're a punchline. And so that's like if he can get, and Al Jefferson's a good offensive player. And not only that, he's going to soak up a ton of possessions that would otherwise go to very bad offensive players.
Yep.
And you can get to 30 wins in the NBA with that roster. And if you get to 30 wins, you're suddenly like, no one's talking about how bad the Bobcats are anymore.
So in a roundabout way, we agree. Because
it's hard. Yeah, I guess we do.
Because Utah, he was in a position where he's on a pretty good team, so you couldn't just throw it to him every time. I think Charlotte's going to give him the ball every time. Like in my fantasy league, I think Al Jefferson should go higher than he normally does. I would fully expect him to average like 24 points a game next year because their whole offense is going to revolve around getting him the ball. So if you look at, this is why I didn't mind the deal and then why I didn't mind overpaying for it. 3 years, $41 million. That first year's a throwout because that's the best year of any free agent deal is the first year. So really you're looking at year 2 and year 3, he's making $27 million, something like that. It's a tradable contract. The last year of it's expiring.
Year 3 is a player option too.
Oh, is it?
That's what the plan was. I mean, we won't know until the end of the moratorium, but that's what the plan was. And if the team is still bad, he's bolting there anyway.
Well, you brought up Millsap. That was the most confusing deal of the summer to me. Just seems like everybody's getting overpaid by between 20 and 40%, or in Zaza Pachulia's case, 300%. And here's Millsap, who's really good, who goes for 2 years, 19. How does that happen?
I thought that was a typo. When I saw 2 years, 19, I thought it was a typo for a second. I almost I don't know. I mean, I don't know unless he just sort of, he likes what the Hawks are building. He's willing to sniff it out for a couple of years and then go somewhere else for another big deal when he's still in his prime. And the market went fast. And it went for shooters. And like all of a sudden it was down to like 3 teams with cap space, which is the reality that Jeff Teague and Brandon Jennings are dealing with right now. And once that happens, it's like, well, okay, I guess this is the team that I have to sign with, and they have some leverage. And it's still it's a raise based on per year salaries from what he was making last year. But he's a really, really good player. And Atlanta, again, like everyone wrote off Atlanta this time last year. They're going to be competitive again. I mean, they're going to be. You put Korver, Lou Williams is back. Let's assume they get one of Teague and Jennings. Horford, I mean, they're going to miss Josh Smith's ability to create shots, which is not something that Horford or Millsap do especially well. But they're going to be good.
I like Dennis Schroeder. I think he's gonna play right away. And you and I were emailing yesterday about Pekovic, and Pekovic is the weirdest subplot of the summer for me, other than everything Milwaukee did. I just don't get it. Like, New Orleans is hot after the trail of Tyreek Evans from like day one. Pekovic, if you polled basically anyone who knows anything about basketball who works for the league and asked them, who'd you rather have, Tyreek Evans or Nikola Pekovic? Everyone picks Pekovic. Yet nobody's made a run at him. And it almost seems like, as you said in the email to me yesterday, well, people just assume he's going to re-sign there. Well, so what? Find out. Make him an offer. Offer him 4 years, 55, and make Minnesota match it. Like, all that does is help you if Kevin Love becomes a free agent in 2 years. I think Atlanta, who has the cap space to go after him, if they made a run at Pekovic, that team could basically be a fringe contender next year if they got him. Now, I think Minnesota would match, but don't you have to explore that?
Well, yeah, it's not as if, everyone's like, well, they're going to match and this is restricted free agency. I mean, it's only a year ago that restricted free agency was very noisy. Portland went after Hibbert. Minnesota went after Batum. There was like a lot of, drama in restricted free agency. So it's not like it never happened. Now, and I agree with you. Atlanta would be interesting to me. The other obvious one is Cleveland. I don't know what's stopping Cleveland from throwing a big offer at Pekovic. And I know what's stopping them. The idea that they want to be, a player for LeBron next year and the year after.
You just answered your question.
Well, but they can be that if let's say they get him at a big number. They get Pekovic at a big number. And you really want to be a player for LeBron next summer. Okay, then you move Varejao in the middle of the season for no long-term money. So there's $9-10 million that comes off your books. Maybe you attach a rookie contract to a player you no longer like. You're up to $11 or $12 million you've just sliced away, and you're back, $25 million under the cap with a chance to make a run at a guy. They're another one to me. It's like, why not? And Portland, I think, would have tossed an offer sheet at Pekovic, but they moved more quickly when they got into the Tyreek, Robin Lopez thing. So, I mean, look, I don't know what Pekovic is going to sign for. The Timberwolves could get him at the qualifying offer for 1 year. They could get him at a discounted rate, but I agree with you. He's been the missing man.
If nobody signs Pekovic in the next 3 days, I'm gonna throw a hissy fit on Twitter. I'm just warning everybody. It doesn't make sense. Like, watch basketball. The guy's good. And especially, like you mentioned, Cleveland, him and Kyrie running the high screen would be really kind of devastating, right?
Yeah, it would, and maybe Cleveland would respond not only with the cap room thing, but with we've got Bennett now, we've got Tristan Thompson, we've got guys who can do that. But they also made a lot of noise about we don't want to be in the lottery anymore. We want to be a playoff team. We want to be a second round playoff team. And now, like this year. So if you really want to be that, that's a guy that can help you.
I brought this up to Matt Barry. Who says no to Anderson Varejao and the Russian kid Cleveland drafted for a year of Pau Gasol? Because if I'm the Lakers, I'm just blowing this up. I don't want to be good next year.
That may. I don't know who says no to that. That's a good trade. That's a good fake trade.
Thank you.
The Lakers should say yes to that. And as you say, the Lakers should be joining the tank parade because next year is gone for them, and they're going to. Instead, it looks like they're going to get Kaman and all these other guys that are going to prop them up to 35 to 40 wins next year, which is not where you want to be.
Idiotic. I don't know why. Just own it. Unless you really think Kobe can come back by like November 15th, you got to throw the season away. You just have to. You already have the season ticket money. The Laker fans are smart. They'll get it. I don't understand it. My goals for this season would be not to pay any luxury tax and to be as terrible as possible. I said this to Barry. You missed it. When Kobe comes back, just tell him, look, you need, 39,000 to get to Kareem? These last 50 games, we'll let you shoot 40 times a game. We'll tell everybody else not to shoot. You can shoot. Every game will be the 81-point game against Toronto. Just knock yourself out. Go nuts. And I think he'd probably be okay with that for a year if he knew that it was leading to, something bigger. But was there any other shocking free agent thing for you this past week?
Shocking free agent thing. Let's see. Jared Jack going to Cleveland surprised me a little bit. Although I get it and it makes sense. Iguodala to Golden State. It didn't come totally out of nowhere, but it surprised me how proactive Golden State was, and I think they did a nice job.
So in that regard. That. Interesting.
And
I don't know if I like that as I don't know if I like that as much as you.
I mean, I don't love it. I think there are some fit issues they're going to have to work out and some minutes distribution issues. And they're really the degree to which, as presently constructed, they're counting on Bogut is a little bit scary in terms of their frontline depth. And Azili's out for a while. But, yeah, I like and look, they got Iguodala in hopes of getting Howard via sign and trade with one of their other guys. That, to me, was the right play. To just go all in for Howard, Iguodala, and like try and be a championship contender right away. So I like that. And Collison taking less than $2 million to go to the Clippers was also surprising.
I mean, he's only 25 years old.
Yeah, look, he's not very good. He's okay.
He was awful last season.
He frustrated the hell out of everyone in Dallas. He plays very bad defense, which is weird considering he came into the league as an alleged, defense first guy. But for that price and in the role he's going to be in, that's a really nice fit for him. Now they just need to fill out the front line, and we're seeing these rumors now about Jamison and Odom and all these, shaky guys they're going to get. I mean,
come on.
Yeah, and Hollins they've already re-signed. So they need another good big man, and I'm not sure where they're going to get it.
I don't mean to throw water on the Clipper fans, but what killed them last year? It wasn't offense. It wasn't shooting. It was the fact that they couldn't stop anybody in the paint. And they have not solved that problem. I'm looking at their roster. It's the same. They had the same guys they had last year that Memphis just overpowered. So what are you doing about that? And I know like a little of this was unfair because for whatever reason, this free agency was all point guards and perimeter guys. And there weren't there weren't centers and there weren't shot blockers and the kind of people they need. But who are you playing in crunch time? You're playing Blake Griffin and DeAndre Jordan. We've seen that play the last 3 years. And they're not going to be good enough defensively. And it's not like they added, you mentioned this, I think you tweeted it, Dudley and Redick, who I like both of those guys a lot. I think you can win titles with those guys as role players. But the Clippers still don't have that guy who's like, so-and-so is hot. Send this guy in to stop him. Who's that guy in this team?
I think it's going to be Matt Barnes. And I really like Matt Barnes. He's going to have problems in that role, but he can do it well enough to, I think, pass muster. He's finally getting paid what he deserves. He's going to be their perimeter defense guy. Look, in the Clippers' defense, there were a lot of big men on the market. They were just out of their price range. Once they re-signed Chris Paul, they had no cap flexibility other than the mid-level exception. So they're not getting Splitter or Jefferson or Millsap or one of these glamour guys. And then you have to scrounge, the bottom of the barrel for the Ryan Hollins kind of players.